Okay, morena tātou, welcome everybody. Thursday the 2nd of May, the governing body meeting. We've got a busy agenda today. We've got a reasonable attendance of physical human beings here and councillors. Baker, Dalton, Furley, Derby, Henderson, Hills, Williamson, Stewart, Ferry and the Deputy Mayor. I think the others are online.
Yes, we have Councillor Newman, Watson, Leone, Lee and Walker online.
Thank you. Okay, I have no apologies. I think Ken Turner's just lurking in the corner. He's nearly here. No apologies? No. We won't move then. Any declarations of interest? Nothing. A confirmation of the minutes. Mover and a seconder, and those are there, which we discuss a bit later in the day, I'm pleased to know. The move will be moved by the Deputy Mayor, and I'll second it myself, and we'll accept those. All those in favour, please say aye. Can't you carry? Right, we have, under public input, we have received two requests. One from Marlon Drake of Te Auhu, Whakawhanonga Tamaki Makaurau, which we have referred to the Planning, Environment and Parks Committee, which hold the delegation for community well-being. So that's going to appear before you, Richard Hills, if that's okay. And we have accepted one from the Mission Bay Kohimarama Residents Association, Wanda Mountford, which refers to item 10. So we'll ask her to come forward just preceding item 10, if that's okay. And that will, the local board input, Aoraki Local Board, will actually present item 10, which is a request from the local board, Community Service Provision Assessment in Mission Bay. These are regarding the Tagalad Reserve South. Extraordinary items of none known. So item 7, item 7, which is basically matters arising, which is what's a list of reports back and decisions from the last governing body and the actions that have arisen from those decisions. And it was good to get the museum onto a 3-year funding agreement. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we don't need to do a dance each time. And we've got the Arafa levy reduced, which is also good. This is an information report only, so I'll remove this. And do I have a seconder for that? Myself and the Deputy Mayor, please. In favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. If there's anyone to discuss anything there, but I don't know if there's a discussion required on that. Okay, on that basis, I'll move on to welcome Phil and Nicola. Is Nicola here? Yeah. Somewhere. Oh, here she is. The Chief Executive and Group Financial Officer update. I hope they're going to share some good news, and then we'll hear from bleak news from Gary about the economy. So we're on item 8 for those who've just wandered in. I'll welcome Councillor Fletcher.
Kia ora koutou and morning, councillors. Thank you, Your Worship. A few things from me. I'll start off by, and Nicola will cover this in more depth, but just to note, things are favourable in terms of operating expenditure, revenue, savings and the CapEx program. Not so favourable in relation to CapEx that you should be concerned about important projects not being progressed, but in financial terms in a good space. So always good to start with that reassurance that things are on track in the financial domain, and Nicola will talk to that in more detail. Other highlights in the last month. Our team supported 87 Anzac Day services, supporting the RSA and other players with a large number of them, planning and delivering 26 of those through the events team. So thanks to that team. I've tried to keep you informed about a particular priority of mine, which is around the graduate program in council. Bit of a passion project for me. We've doubled that. We've now got 30 graduates in there, and we're set to increase to 50 in the next tranche. Interestingly, for your information, we had 800 graduates register an interest in that program. So there's good demand, and hopefully, I'm confident it reflects the fact that we do important and interesting work, and it's a marketable proposition to people in terms of starting out their job experience. So that's really positive. We graduated 15 folk through our Kia Puawai program. Some of you will be familiar with that, some of you not. This is a key tool for bringing people into areas like the call centre. It's a project run in conjunction with the Ministry of Social Development and the Solomon Group, and it specifically targets people who need a fresh start in terms of work. So a really positive story there. We, of course, concluded the consultation around the long-term plan. You've been briefed on that, but it's worth acknowledging 28,000 submissions through that process. That's the first point in terms of quantum. The second point is that actually the breadth, the diversity that's reflected within those submissions is really pleasing, in that it reflects well on the broad church that is Tamaki Makaurau communities. You have an item later in the agenda, and Matt, Mace and others will reflect on this, but it is pleasing to note that we've now completed 1,300 categorisations of homes, so that what you will see in this area is quite a bit of acceleration, and it's boding well in terms of cracking through the vast majority in the time frame that we set for mid-year. So that's now ticking along at between 300 and 500 per month. So a lot of work sits in behind that I acknowledge. Our regional parks had over 2.5 million visits in the quarter from January to March, and that is a record in terms of numbers through those important assets. I can see Councillor Fletcher smiling, isn't that good?
I'm smiling for Scott De Silva too.
Yeah. We reopened the Community Recycling Centre in Warkworth. That's of note. I think there's a broader picture there in terms of these community-based recycling efforts around the region ramping up significantly, and that's a nice little case study that illustrates that point. And the Waterview Sewer Separation Project has started construction as part of the Western Isthmus Joint Program with Watercare. So that's good. A few other updates. I mentioned this at a session yesterday for elected members, but I just point out that today is the day for me to announce the final decisions around changes to the organisational structure, and that's going to proceed. Well, I'm communicating that later today, so just be aware of that, and very happy to take any questions offline. There'll be some specific communication to you as Mayor and Councillors around that, so that you're informed. On the theme of working with government in the policy space, there continues to be a huge amount of work. I'm not going to go into detail. Suffice to say that there are active discussions and good collaboration with the Mayor and the Mayor's office, I might add, around Transport, Resource Management Act changes, building reforms, the fast-track consenting process, and of course the water reform realm, which is on your agenda, and it's not appropriate to say too much about it until we get to that item in the confidential part. But while we're in public, I do just want to acknowledge and thank a number of people who have, I should say, worked really diligently, really hard over recent times to try and bring that to a conclusion and put you in the position today of making a decision about the way forward. So thank you for that. I'm going to pause at this point. I've asked Craig Hobbs to join me. I thought it might be timely, and it's some months since we've done this, just to give you a few highlights in terms of what's happening in the consenting space, which of course is a window into the level, the rate of development in the region. And Craig, just if you might, a few reflections.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Thank you, Phil, and nice to be with you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I just wanted to touch on the consenting volumes currently, and I guess the genesis of this. So I'm just going to turn down my speaker because I'm getting feedback. That's better. Just wanted to touch on, I guess, the genesis of this presentation to you, or the conversation with you, is around my conversation with Phil recently, where we talked about the escalation in complaints over recent months from members of the public through elected members or to us directly. But just before I get to that point and why that's occurring, or why it may be occurring, just wanted to run through some numbers with you. So our building consents in terms of lodged numbers for the 12 months to the end of March compared to the previous 12 months, we're 8% down. That's building consents. We are 25% down on where we were at 2 years ago when we had the boom through COVID. So significant step back. The positive is, though, for the 3 months, the last 3 months, so this calendar year versus the previous, or the 3 months of the previous calendar year, first 3 months, we're 1% up in terms of lodgement. So things are starting to pick up slightly. For resource consents, so that was resource consents. For building consents, we're 8% down on the 12 months to the end of March. And compared to the previous 12 months, we're 26% down on where we were pre-COVID, but we're 3% up on the 3 months of this calendar year versus the first 3 months of last calendar year. So again, just showing some improvement. In terms of CCCs issued, we are 7% up on the 12-month figure, and 5% up on the last 3 months. So again, some improvement there. Customer satisfaction in resource consents for March was sitting at 84%. We've seen some really good gains in that space in the last short while. Some of that reflected of a new GM in that space and doing some great work. For building consents, we actually dropped from 73% in February to 68% in March. We're looking into why that drop's occurred. Not exactly sure why at the moment, but they traditionally sit around the mid-70s. In terms of our statutory performance last week, this is looking really good. So our building consent performance against statutory performance last week was 90%. For resource consents, it was 82%. For CCCs, Code of Compliance Certificates, we were 91%. So we're getting them out the door and pretty pleased with that. I am going to touch on some of the issues that we are facing currently, but I just wanted to, I know that for elected members, quite often you feel the brunt of customers complaining to you. And I know that is an awkward position. We try and respond as quickly as we can, but I just want to give you some perspective on the number of complaints we get as a percentage of our applications. So this is over the last month, for the month of March. Building consents, we received 2,763 applications. We had 15 complaints, so 0.5% of the of our total consents managed, we get complaints about. For resource consents, 1,149 applications, we had 9 complaints, which is a 0.8% complaint rate. Rig engineering is where we are struggling a bit. We're at 1.75% in terms of complaints to applications. A lot of that down to the number of, or the struggle to employ engineers at the moment. I'll again come back to that. That is proving challenging. But I just wanted to put the complaints in perspective. And I know you may be sitting there thinking, well, there's a lot we don't hear about. There are certainly a number of calls that come into the call centre where we resolve issues before they become a complaint, which is great work on behalf of the call centre. But in the scheme of things, based on the volumes we put through, I'm actually reasonably comfortable with those that complaint ratio. Now, obviously, we'd like to be at 0, and I'm also acknowledging that we do get things wrong at times, and part of our work program is to address those issues and improve our processes and systems where we can. But I just wanted to touch on the situation. We run a stakeholder reference group, which is made up of representatives of the Property Council, Master Builders, the Institute of Architects, New Zealand Planning Institute, basically all the major players in the construction and development industry. They have identified to us in recent times, and again, I'm not abdicating responsibility here where we do get things wrong occasionally, but there is unfortunately a real potential, or the issue out there in the sector at the moment where consultants, project managers and so on are putting in consents that they know are deficient. We do have issues around the quality of consents coming in, and part of that is due to the fact that once it's in our hands, we become the excuse for things being slow. It gives them the opportunity to work on other projects. It also gives them the opportunity quite often to bid low for work and then charge an hourly rate after the fact as things drag on. So that is something that we're working with the stakeholder reference group to address. How do we actually get quality applications in with all the information that we need to work on, so we can go straight away on those consents. But the other thing that's come out of the work we've done with the stakeholder reference group is the fact that a lot of developments in Auckland nowadays are on land that is suboptimal. We know that we've used all the best space, the best land, both brownfields, even greenfield sites. And I'll use an example of quite a major subdivision that's going on at the moment. I won't share where that is because it is a live application, but for this particular consent, there are 48 different formal documents and plans required to be submitted for that. 55 different resource consent, engineering or building consents requirements under this, and it hasn't got to a building consent stage yet. This is purely for a subdivision. So I just wanted to sort of, demonstrate the complexity of what our teams are dealing with, but also what our customers are dealing with, where they have to work through all our requirements based on, resource consenting. There's 7 pieces of New Zealand legislation our people have to consider when we go back for information, or when we receive an application. There's 4 national policy statements, there's 5 national environmental statements, there's 5 Auckland Council policy and bylaws that they have to meet, including the unitary plan, 6 Auckland transport bylaws. So again, just trying to give you an insight into the complexity of what we need now from our customers, what we have to consider when we receive consents, and as I say, particularly on areas where the land is suboptimal. And the one I mentioned, this consent I mentioned a minute ago, it's a bundled consent for land use, for subdivision and for watering, in other words, taking water off the site. So, pretty complex, and that seems to be the norm nowadays. So, we do get into situations where we're going back looking for more information that we haven't received. Our customers are getting frustrated because we're asking for that information. They're trying to navigate the complexities of the policies and bylaws and national policy statements and the likes that they have to work through. Really, really interesting times. So my colleague Megan Tyler would tell you that we've probably been in this situation for about 5 years, but it's really coming back to bite on our teams now. I just wanted to touch on engineering as a particular situation where we do have some challenges at the moment, structural engineering particularly. And I quote from an Engineering New Zealand report in October 23, quality issues in the building system, overcoming inadequate structural engineering design. Now, the Building Act is quite specific around meeting certain standards. We are seeing more and more engineering designs coming into us that have alternative solutions, and trying to quantify whether they meet the building code and actually demonstrate compliance has been challenging both for us and for a lot of those design companies, engineering design companies. We are risk averse based on the fact that joint and several liability, we tend to be the last man standing and have to put our hand in our pocket when, or the ratepayer's pocket when we have issues. But it is creating a real challenge for us. I have got a meeting coming up with MB Engineering New Zealand, the Association of Consulting Engineers, and the Structural Engineering overarching group coming up shortly to address these issues. Because what we're finding is that we will try and assess a design where we don't have engineers ourselves that have the qualifications to do that. We'll use a third party. There's fewer design companies out there that want to give us advice because of the liability issues. And we end up in a situation where there is quite a bit of challenge around what is acceptable or not. So that's an issue for us. The other thing I mentioned before is the lack of engineers out there in the sector, and Engineering New Zealand again tell us that we need at least 2,300 new engineers every year to sustain economic development. Currently, there's only about 2,000 graduating annually, and that number's decreasing. So it is a challenge for us. So I'll pause there. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into our performance currently, where we're sitting in terms of consent volumes, but also some of the challenges that we're faced with. And I'm more than happy to take questions. I don't know whether you want to do that now, Your Worship, or later on.
Councillor Turner and Councillor Fletcher want to do it now, so you can have them, and Councillor Ferry and the Deputy Mayor. So you've obviously proved yourself a lot more interesting than the library development last week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Well, it felt like you were responding directly to my 13,000-word email that I've sent to I don't know how many senior people and not yet had one reply. You say we only had 15 complaints or something like that, but you spent a long time justifying the problems we have dealing with our applications. Of those 15 complaints, could I see a breakdown at some stage of between the key stakeholders and Mr. Joe Bloggs? So what I'm asking there is, are the complaints coming from those big builder entities which you have a first-hand relationship with, or are they coming from Mr. Joe Bloggs, who has no relationship with us?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Look, I can give you that breakdown. I don't have it with me at the moment. A lot of these issues are through consultants and designers that we would expect to know better, and I referenced why we think that we are having issues. I would make the point again, though, that the number of complaints are not massive, but when we do get them, they tend to be quite complex, and because of the size and scope of some of these big subdivisions, it is challenging. There is no doubt that a lot of the issues we have is around the quality of the applications and whether all the information is there and what we require. Part of our challenge is that when we receive a consent, we tend to it takes us 2 or 3 days to actually start processing it. At that point, we're really obligated to continue rather than sending it back. We only have, I think, something like 0.8% of consents get rejected at application. That should be a lot greater, I personally believe, and it's something we are looking at. But again, it's an education process with the sector. We're all in this together. We need to make sure that we have applications that we can work on immediately, that are of a standard that we can accept, and also our applicants know what we require of them.
Thank you. I'll go offline.
Your Worship, my question is to Phil Wilson. May I take that now, or yeah? Phil, I like this new format, that doing a deep dive into specific areas. I think that's really good. So, but my question relates to the experience that we're having of high inflation, high interest rates, decreasing incomes. What formal advice can you give us in terms of those that are defaulting or deferring on rates, and what do you anticipate we might expect going forward?
Councillor, I don't have those figures with me. I have seen recently some information about this, but I'll probably need to come back to you shortly. I think I'd be presuming to know, but I strongly suspect, given the economic climate, that there is some acceleration in this area. But let's let the facts speak for themselves when I can table that for you. I'll just pause in case Nicola does have something. So
I'm happy to receive a report on it, and I'm also interested to know whether there will be policy advice coming forward around other measures that we can take in a compassionate sense to support our community at this time.
Absolutely. No, I see the connection, so we'll do both things.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. My question is for Craig. You mentioned before about the industry reference group, I think you said. I'm also aware that the Rural Advisory Panel quite often has items in regard to sort of the regulatory space. I thought it might be helpful if you explained a little bit about what the relationship is there. That a lot of the regulatory stuff that affects the rural sector goes to that advisory panel too, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And look, I don't know directly, I'm afraid. I do know that Councillor Sayers facilitated a meeting with our RMA consent or compliance team in Warkworth this week to discuss with the farmers up there how we sort of, I guess, manage consents and compliance with them. But I don't have a direct answer to your question. Sorry, they aren't part of our stakeholder reference group.
Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Craig, question for you. Look, it's really pleasing to hear that the complaints probably aren't as bad as what we get. We seem to get them all to us, I think. Maybe you don't get them all. But my question is really quite simple. When you go back, the complaint that I get the most is you're taking too long, right? When I talk to you or your team about why we're taking so long in processing consents, it's because you tell me that often it's because the applicant isn't providing all the information or there's some inaccuracies. So my question is really simple. Do you go back to the person when they don't supply and say the reason that we cannot promptly deliver on your consent is that you haven't supplied, or we are still waiting to hear, or as yet you haven't given us whatever, and it's in bold? Because I know it sounds really simple, but there is a real disconnect with people's frustration at you not delivering the result that they want. But actually, if they haven't provided the work, that's why you can't do it. So I'm really keen to make sure I'm really sure in my own head that you're clearly going back to these people and telling them why you are not able to progress their whatever it is as soon as you can.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Look, I think the best way to answer that is that it's a variety, and I know that's not what you want to hear. I mean, we do have a lot of young staff who are navigating complex documents and maybe aren't being as clear as they could be in terms of the information they want. That is something we are addressing, but that's not a major number. The biggest and to your question around do we go back and tell customers what we want? Yes, we do. In requests for information, we can do one of those for a resource consent. We can do any number for a building consent. So it is very clear what we do require, we believe, albeit as I stated before, we do sometimes perhaps confuse the issue because it's not clear or we ask for the same thing twice. Areas that we need to address. Our new digital tool, which I have referenced in the past, actually has a customer engagement piece to it where customers can now see where their consent sits. Now, this is in building consents, not in resource consents yet, but every customer can log in, have a look at where their consent is sitting in terms of who has responsibility for it. And I referenced before that occasionally we become the fall guy because a consultant said, well, council's holding us up. Reality is we've asked a whole lot of questions, requests for information, and it's sitting with the consultant. That's now visible to the customer. It's also visible if we're sitting on it. It's also visible if a Auckland Transport or Water Care specialists are sitting on it. So, and there are there's contact numbers in there so people can go directly to them. A lot of our clients, though, actually don't get that visibility because there is that middleman in between the consultant or the project manager. So we want everyone to have access to that information if we can, anyone who's involved in a consent.
Councillor Bartley, please.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I used to get developers rip my ear off when they'd ring me and complain, but I'm noticing now a difference in that. And I have some developers tell me that they've gone on LinkedIn and positively commented about the experience they've had. So, Craig, I just wanted to know, aside from the digital tool, what else you think has been the reason for that change coming through regarding consenting?
Thanks, Councillor. And that's nice to hear. I think look, we're trying to be more collaborative. We want to engage with the industry as a whole. You know, I think the issues that we face around construction and development, there's a systemic issue across the whole sector. A lot of it driven by lack of experience, by the economic imperatives that we're facing, by the level of red tape. I mean, we can't hide behind the fact that there is a lot of requirements around ensuring you know, the quality of building and so on. But we are working now with, as the stakeholder reference group's a great reference group for us. They sense check everything we're doing, give us feedback as to what we can do better. The first thing we asked them was, what are all the dumb things we do? And we've worked through that list and addressed them. We are working with the Auckland University as well in our building consents area to try and get a standard template which would go to all potential applicants, all the professional bodies, that says this is how we need an application provided, here's the information we need, and so on. So it's a work in progress, but there's a lot going on to try and, I guess, improve our standing and our responsiveness to the sector.
Oh, thank you. And while I got the microphone, I'd like to acknowledge the Building Inspectorate team, Ian McCormack, Jeff Farrenson, and yourself for the proactive leadership you guys took regarding the evacuation notice given to the high-rise building in Auckland City, because so often we read in the media about lodges and other cities that are catching fire and people dying. So for you guys to take that kind of action is really appreciated by us, because we would never want to see such tragedy happen in our city. So just want to acknowledge the work of the building inspectors and Jeff and Ian. Thank you.
You're a councillor, thank you.
Yeah, that was a fair assessment of things. Good on you. Angela Dalton, please. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you very much. I've got a question for Craig and a question for Phil. Craig, mine is not very strategic in the context of what you've presented this morning, but it does have public interest, so I'd like to ask it. In brownfields areas, in suburbs like mine, it's really important that developers are a good neighbour. So when we've got the one-off building development that's taking place, they're not mowing their berms. We are getting rubbish dumped in the berms. They're leaving rubbish around. We've got some really good developers around, but not all the time. It's very difficult. I've worked on this with a number of residents. It's not always easy to get somebody out to speak to that developer. I'm wondering, is there anything in the compliance space around this, because it is important that they are a good neighbour to existing residents who do care for their properties?
Yeah, kia ora, councillor. Look, we will respond to complaints as best we can. Can we get to things as quickly as we'd like? Quite often not. And to be honest, we have to see it as well, which is part of our challenge. You know, we have to be able to identify that there is is some compliance breach going on. But yeah, we will work to educate those developers who or builders who are perhaps not meeting the standards required as much as we can. There are certain things, and I don't want to sound like I'm passing the buck here, some things are Auckland Transport related. If they're footpath and roadway related, we do engage with them and hope to get them involved where we can. There are also, we get dragged into a lot of what I would call civil issues as well, boundary issues, retaining walls, things that don't need a consent, but where one neighbour isn't happy with another neighbour, and that can be challenging. And again, we'll try and mediate where we can, but we don't actually have any powers in those spaces. So, Councillor Dalton, I hope that answers your question. But yeah, I know it is a frustration. We try and get to as many as we can. Do we get to all of them? Probably not, but we do what we can.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I guess just to clarify, is it a compliance issue or not, the whole not taking care of that berm area and leaving rubbish in the footpath area?
Yeah, certainly rubbish and the likes is an issue. I mean, we do tend to come down quite hard on sediment. I mean, that tends to be our major focus on building sites. You know, how do we contain sediment? But yeah, if builders are leaving rubbish on the roadway or on neighbouring properties and so on, I mean, neighbouring properties is a civil issue. But if it's on the roadways and so on and council property, then we obviously have a right to go in and manage that.
Thank you, Craig, and I appreciate it. it needs a lot of staffing to be able to do that and do that really efficiently. So I get that, but thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I do acknowledge that council did give us some added resource about 12 months ago, and that has helped. Hopefully you're seeing the benefit of that, so thank you.
Thank you. And Phil, just to follow up on Councillor Fletcher's question about rates, I think it's really important that we do a comms plan or program on what we offer in terms of assistance to ratepayers. So rates postponement, talking about making it easier to pay your rates either weekly, fortnightly. We had the opportunity during COVID to not put penalties on arrears. Is that something we should look at as we go through the current cost of living crisis? What does that cost? So I'm really looking for a plan of how we can communicate out to ratepayers that this is what we can offer. That's still not going to ease the burden of the rates, but it might make it a little bit more achievable to not get into penalties. And can we remove the penalties? Thank you.
Yeah, look, so the short answer is yes, we can do that. We'll point some communications folk to that challenge. I'd also note that, you know, Watercare is also in that frame in terms of costs of water for households, and they have some mechanisms as well, so that's useful.
Thank you for that. Councillor Newman, please.
Good morning, Craig. I assume Craig's still there. Yeah, Craig, can you take a question regarding animal management?
I'll do my best, Councillor. Thank you.
Yeah, look, firstly, on behalf of my constituents in Conifer Grove, thank you very much to the animal management team for the excellent work that they undertook. I think we're able to capture all but one dog of interest, and I know it was a very fraught situation. The challenges obviously are still there in the animal management space, and it's not just in Conifer Grove, it's all over Auckland. Certainly in other parts of my ward it's challenging. Craig, what I wanted to know is, I mean, look, depending on how the budget discussions go, how quickly would you anticipate being able to increase the capacity of the McLaughlin Road shelter?
So thank you, Councillor. So we are working on increasing the capacity. You gave us approval to put a submission into the LTP and then to bring that CapEx forward. So we're currently working on Manukau, well, we're about to start work, I should say. Architects are in play, designing what we need to do for Manukau and Henderson, and then followed by Silverdale and the Pukekohe Animal Shelter, which was leased to Waikato District Council. We're bringing that back as of the 1st of July, and we're already starting to upgrade that, Councillor Newman. So things are afoot, but you know, like everything, it takes time to get these things built.
Yeah, I asked the question because there have been several instances recently where the shelter was absolutely full. It was over full, and obviously we're now starting to move dogs from McLaughlin Road to other parts of the region, which is, yeah, we can do that, but obviously other parts of the region need that capacity as well. So is this something that you can alleviate before the end of calendar year, depending on the budget outcomes?
Yes, anticipate we will be, and we'll have those extra kennels. And I can't give you the numbers, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, but they're significant in terms of additional kennels. They pretty much should all be in play by the end of the calendar year.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, Craig. I have one thing that I'll be able to thank you for, but there's one thing that it's an issue that I know that you probably know that I'm going to probably bring up, and that's the famous catchment. I won't mention the actual street, but I just wonder, how is it that we can actually allow to sign off for a development to go ahead in an area that we know is prone to flood? Now, the particular property that I'm talking about that's going to have 6 developments on it, the last time it flooded was the 30th of December 2023, and I'd actually been sending a lot of emails to a number of your staff and some of the consenting staff and different things, just making sure that they were aware what was still happening. And then I see on the, I think it was the 18th of June, I think it was the 18th of June, under delegation, one of the staff out at Manukau had actually signed off for the development to go ahead. And I'm just really, really concerned because this sort of thing's happening time and time again, and it's going to come home to bite us. This particular street or this particular catchment actually had a moratorium on it back in 2002, 2004. Montgomery Watson and Audit New Zealand did a report with Manukau, and a lot of these areas were known that they should not be built on, and yet this is one that I don't know how many times I've mentioned it around this council table since 2010, but, you know, is there anything we can do to make sure that when things are red flagged and we have got developments that we know that are going to go ahead, and no matter what they're saying is going to they can do is probably not going to happen because it's on a stream, it's on a catchment that it's just I can't see it working. Can we do something, and can we make sure that in the future, and it's for right around the region, Auckland region, can we just make sure that when we know there's an area that is flood prone and it's going to take a hell of a lot to fix it, we shouldn't be allowing any developments to go in unless Healthy Waters have actually done the job and they've been, because we're creating a problem for Healthy Waters, and it's going to come home to bite, and eventually we'll probably end up having to buy the land.
Craig, just before you get into that, I might just intervene if I can. This is a real issue, as you and I have discussed, Councillor, offline. I can tell, for other councillors' benefit, in relation to this particular catchment that Councillor Stewart's concerned with, and a few other examples around the region, we are having a good look at that. It's fair to say it's difficult because we've got the right mix of consideration from a Healthy Waters point of view, a planning and a plan change point of view, and the building regulation end of things here. So, with your indulgence, I suggest we probably have a wider discussion to have around this, and it would be wise to take it offline. Not to minimise the point that's been made, it's very real and we're working on it. In fact, I've got a number of people working on it right now.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stewart. Thank you for that presentation there, Craig. As a person who does apply for things, I know that the RFIs, or requests for information, can be fairly annoying, and sometimes just simply ringing the person up rather than sending them something solves a lot of questions, you know, because quite a lot of RFIs, in fact, in my experience, are in their documents somewhere or other, but there's so many bloody documents these days, it's just easy to miss things. And I also understand that you are working in a field where there are confusing regulations. Central government and local government pass regulations which are often at cross purposes, and then we have national policy statements which are at cross purposes to reality. And so it is fraught with difficulty. But pick up the phone is a really good, sensible thing. But thank you for that presentation. And this stage here, I think we'll refer to Nicola, who's just waiting to sort out our financial difficulties and report on us shortly. Thank you very much, Craig, for that input. And you
Your Worship, thank you.
A whole lot better than the libraries.
Are we going to start defending the libraries now, or?
We love the libraries.
Okay.
I just thought that was
That's what I want to hear.
Yeah,
Good.
it was just the presentation was it was a long book. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, good morning, Mayor and councillors. So just a couple of things that I want to cover off today. Phil has already talked a bit to the long-term plan and the pleasing number of public submissions that we received from quite a diverse range of Aucklanders and organisations. So just to speak to the process, following the public consultation period, we are now in full swing and the Budget Committee has been spending quite a lot of time together. The topics for the LTP, some are very complex and do require a lot of time to understand and discuss and allow us to update advice to you on those matters. The workshops have also covered the public feedback in some detail, and we also have input from local boards to come, as well as refreshed budget information leading up to a final mayoral proposal and decision making scheduled for the 16th of May. The final LTP will then be adopted by the 30th of June. I'll turn now to the financial performance for the 9 months to the end of March. There will be more detailed performance information coming to the GB meeting later this month, but I will touch on a few things today. So the group's capital investment has now reached 2.2 billion this year, so that is 97% of the budget spent, which does indicate strong delivery of capital this year. It's very pleasing. The largest areas of expenditure are by Watercare and Auckland Transport, which will probably be of no surprise to you. In particular, so Watercare have invested over 800 million so far this year. One of their highlights in the month of March, the Central Interceptor tunnel boring machine has reached the 10-kilometre mark and is headed to Point Erin in Herne Bay. Auckland Transport has invested almost 670 million and at 92% delivery of its budget. They are completing a number of projects right across the region. There have been some delays across capital projects that relate to storm recovery, and I have asked that we do a deeper dive on this issue during the quarterly performance report later this month, just to see whether there are any particular implications arising from those delays. In terms of revenue across the group, we continue to be slightly favourable to budget. Watercare's revenue is strong, and we also had a number of unbudgeted grants that we received from the central government that related to storm costs. And Craig also mentioned the, on the whole, higher consenting volumes and LIMS volumes. Our group expenditure is broadly in line with budget, which is pleasing. Our net debt position has decreased by 235 million since the beginning of the year. That is due to those airport shares being sold, offset by the new borrowings that we take to fund our capital expenditure. In terms of Auckland Council, capital expenditure is tracking well. We are at 92% of our budget and a couple of projects completed, particularly in the healthy waters space in Freeman's Bay and Brassey Road. Our revenue is 14% favourable to budget. That is mainly because of those consenting volumes being higher than what we had expected, and the government grants I mentioned before. There are, just to note though, also additional costs that we incur to process a higher number of consenting volumes. Our expenditure is broadly in line with budget, and as the Mayor requested some good news, I can deliver some good news and note that we have, as of the end of March, achieved our $50 million operating savings target. Very pleased to end on that positive note. We have made significant progress in terms of implementing those initiatives that you signed off on as part of last year's annual plan. We do also have a large number of one-off savings, though, included in how we have achieved that target for this current year. Some of them, for example, come from underspending in staff costs, mainly because we are quite cautious around recruitment, and partly that is due to the change process that Phil mentioned as well. So anyway, good news that we have achieved that for the year. That does not mean we rest on our laurels. We are still working hard to continue to implement ongoing savings and get a head start on what we still have to achieve for FY25 and future years. we'll have a more fulsome report on those savings coming to you also in the quarterly performance report at the end of this month. I will now pass to Gary.
Thank you, Nicola. Morena tatou. Happy birthday, Gary. Thank you, Councillor. How did that get out? Anyway, well, unfortunately, I'll bring
Apple
you
for the teacher.
bring you the gift of some perhaps sober news about the economic context today. Economic activity continues to slow through this contractionary phase of the cycle, as I've mentioned over the past few months, as higher interest rates underpinned by the higher official cash rate are driving a pullback in consumption and investment. And of course, the aim of the Reserve Bank there is to dampen high inflationary pressures, which are of course very damaging to decision-making and financial planning themselves. There's a number of data releases out in the past 2 or 3 weeks that I'd just like to draw to your attention, and of course we can provide this information in written form as well, if that's of interest to you. Annual CPI inflation was out 2 weeks ago. For the March quarter, it's at 4%, and that's down from the prior quarter at 4.7%. So while that looks like some good progress as a headline figure, most of those gains came through the tradable or international channel, and actually domestically, the non-tradable components, as we refer to them, are still quite persistent pressures at 5.8%, only down from 5.9% in the prior quarter, which shows that domestically we've still got those pressures. The Reserve Bank held the official cash rate at 5.5% on the 10th of April, and on the back of that persistence that I mentioned domestically, I think it's unlikely that we'll see a reduction in the official cash rate before the latter part of this year, and possibly not until the early part of next year. Some households are coming under pressure as mortgages are repriced onto higher interest rates, and then more of their income has to go into financing those higher interest costs. As fixed mortgages roll over, we've seen that the majority of them are now on 6% or higher in terms of fixed mortgage rates. And data out this week shows that year on year to the March quarter, interest payments faced by households are up 28%, which shows that additional pressure coming through that interest rate channel. And then mortgage arrears are beginning to climb. As at March, 1.7% of mortgages in Auckland were in arrears, that is failed to make payment within 30 days. And of course that equates to about 8,300 mortgages. Of those, about 2,000 were non-performing or past 90 days. The slowdown in activity, as to be expected, is accompanied by higher unemployment, with a reduction in the number of jobs out there due to redundancies and vacancies going unfilled. Data out yesterday shows that nationally, the unemployment rate rose to 4.3% for the first quarter of 2024. That's up from 4% in the prior quarter, and that's in line with the Reserve Bank's forecast of 4.2%. But for Auckland, the unemployment rate's a little higher at 4.8%, up from 4.2%. That's in part explained by our recent high migration gains, which have increased the size of the labour force. To put those numbers in context, the number of jobs in the March quarter in Auckland declined by 12,000 or 1.2%. And that means the number of jobs declining by 12,000, we've seen the number of unemployed increase by 6,000, and then we've had a further 6,000 people leave the labour force. With respect to the business sector, a combination of higher operating costs, particularly labour and insurance, coupled with lower demand, is putting pressure particularly in industries such as retail, trade, manufacturing and construction. Retail spending volumes have declined throughout 23 and into the first part of this year, even as though we've had strong population growth. The number of company failures, which are measured quarterly, are up almost 30% on this time last year. The share of business loans that are non-performing have also increased. So taken together, this all means that both households and businesses are coming under increased financial pressure at the moment, as has been forecast for some months now. And that's to be expected at this stage of the cycle, which we're in a contractionary phase. But while I've mentioned some that are in non-performing loan situations, and those that have got unemployment are facing difficulties, those proportions remain small. For households, I think we have to put it in context. Strong wage growth over our recent months and years means that in general, if a mortgage holder still has a job, they can generally find ways to manage their payments. However, the outlook is for unemployment to increase a little more over the next year, and so we can expect that to lead to a bit of an increase in arrears too, I think. I'd just close by saying that, as I've indicated, the rest of the year would be a tough one for households and businesses, including for Auckland. I think we might see 2025 a bit of that pressure easing as mortgage rates adjust if we can see some OCR cuts but the timing of that remains uncertain. So I'll just leave it there and open to questions. Thank you.
Right, on that particularly bleak note, I will move that we receive the monthly update from the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer, and will be seconded by the Deputy. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, well, hang on.
Questions?
Comments. There was none on my wall, but suddenly people have come alive.
So, Councillor Alf.
Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I indicated 20 to 11 that I wanted to speak. So, Phil, just congratulations to you and your team in regards to this. There is, however, one thing I just wanted to make a comment on, and that is in regards to the building consents that Craig spoke about. I personally, and before anybody sort of thinks that it's because I was a councillor that this has gone as smooth as I thought it was, I ended up getting an ex-inspector, council inspector, to do my application for a building consent, which was between 100,000 and just under 500,000. So, Craig, if you're still there, just want to acknowledge Ian, Jeff, Farronson, Daphne Hudson, Mandy Chen. Within a month and a half, I ended up getting that application done. And just the work that they've been through, I've heard some of the colleagues around the table and thoughts around the issues that the building consents team or consents team are having. I want to acknowledge them and say thank you so much for something. Obviously, I didn't get involved personally, but the work that they did, I just want to congratulate the team. So congratulations, Phil. And my last comment around the actual report that you've given is what Councillor Dalton had said, and that is the most important thing for us is to make sure that the information goes out to our community around the ability for homeowners to suspend the rates, and I think that's important around the comms. So well done. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Alf. Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. I was sort of waiting for an opportunity for questions that weren't to Craig, so that's what I've got, is a question that's not for Craig, because I thought that's what we were doing earlier. So my question's actually around the rubbish bin removal. I think we've all been receiving a lot of emails. I've had nearly 1,100 emails now, and a lot of community concern about the removal of some of the rubbish bins in public spaces. And I wanted to ask, and I think Claudia's online and is probably the appropriate person.
Claudia is online.
Great.
In part for this subject.
Oh, thank you. What the organisation is doing by way of response to, obviously we've got some like very specific individual, why has this particular bin gone? But there's also some issues with the conversations with local boards where the information given to local boards, their opportunity to influence which bins went and stayed, not necessarily been what I think we anticipated. And then there's also the broader issue. So what's sort of the response from the organisation at this point on that matter? Thanks.
So through the chair, thank you, Councillor Ferry, for your question. Also sitting next to me is one of our wonderful operations managers, but why don't I just start with a quick update. So overall, as you will all recall, the bin removal has been part of the annual budget decision that was made last year so that we could help contribute to rates cost savings. We have now progressed through the program and it's almost complete. So we're actually anticipating that the bin removal would be complete by early May. So we're in that phase now and we're just working through the last components of it. The local boards were informed as part of that process starting June last year, and each of the local boards received information of the proposed bins for removal and had the opportunity to provide feedback. What we're also doing is our operations managers connect with the local boards on a monthly basis to understand where particular hotspots might be, what we might need to do in response, and how we can address concerns. We understand that there has been a number of complaints that came quite recently through pro forma channels, and they were particularly driven by one community group or maybe a couple of community groups and advocacy groups. But before that occurred, we actually had a relatively low complaint rate. There have been instances where we received complaints. We then addressed those complaints and bins were reinstated or moved into a better location so that we could address the concerns. And our teams continue to be happy to do so. Some of the other areas that we've observed, interestingly, relating to people depositing waste in areas where bins didn't even exist in the first instance, or where we haven't removed bins. So there are some misconceptions occurring in the community around this bin removal. And I would really like and appreciate if we can encourage our communities to keep Auckland clean. We live in a beautiful city. We all have a responsibility regarding climate change and minimising waste. And we have a really important role to play. And you heard earlier from our Chief Executive, Phil, that we had about 2.5 million visitors to our regional parks. And those regional parks don't have bins. And actually those wonderful visitors to our parks there also remove their waste. So we are asking Aucklanders to help this process, but we will continue to work with local boards, particularly where they've got concerns or where we may have made a potential error so that we can rectify that. And we do that on at least on a monthly basis. What I'm also proposing is that our teams will craft a memo for the governing body, or we can do that through another one of the committees, just so that we can give you an update on the progress of the bin removal, how it's proceeding, including the number of bins removed, the number of complaints, the types of complaints, and also by location or the approximate local board level, as well as the cost savings that we're anticipating. So hopefully that will then give you more visibility and confidence in the process. But we are asking for your support to continue this important program. It is and will help achieve savings targets, and also it will help Auckland make that commitment towards reducing waste and improving our environmental impact. Thank you very much.
Good answer. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. And I have given staff a heads up about this, but I've been sent a response from a Lagoima showing the proposed removal of bins by local board area, and it's quite scary reading. Can I just ask firstly what criteria were used to decide which bins were taken and from where?
Yes, so thank you, Councillor Henderson, and I'm aware of the concern. My team has just briefed me of the matter relating to your area as well. So of course, what the Lagoima related to was the percentage of bins that are being removed by different local areas and how this might be particularly affecting the Henderson-Massey local board area. So fundamentally, we have followed the same principles throughout the region. We have looked at bins that are in close proximity to each other. We have looked at bins that might be underutilised relative to others. But in the particular area where you're raising concerns, and I'm very happy to take this offline and we can continue conversations offline, what we have become aware of is that some of the bins in your area have were older assets, and so they were facing end of life of those assets. They were not functioning very well anymore, and so therefore had been recommended to be removed. As a result of that, the proposed number of bins to be removed in the Henderson-Massey area is higher than what we had originally hoped for. So what we're going to do is take that offline with you and see, particularly through the local board, which is our main recommended channel, have a conversation about how we might need to address those concerns. We are recommending that our councillors direct concerns via the local boards, if that's okay, and I recognise that has occurred in this instance. What that does is it improves the seamlessness of our communications. It makes sure that we can all be on the same page and we can respond to concerns faster. So our team is looking at that matter and will continue to work on how we can support the local board with any potential changes needed.
Thank you. Just a question in response to that, and thanks for the answer. Look, if they were older assets, that just means they haven't been renewed. That's not the community's problem, right? That's actually another problem. That's another problem to add. But I would say that, you know, according to this Lagoima result here, Henderson-Massey has proposed to lose 52% of their bins. Can I just seek your assurance that that won't happen and we're going to reduce that level?
what we would recommend we do is actually work with the local board and of course invite you to be part of that process to look at the specific data so that we can come up with a solution that works. There is a proposed reduction, of course, where that reduction might be too assertive or too aggressive. What we can do is we can continue to look at how we can perhaps implement that better. And we are certainly committed to be able to have those conversations to see how we can make that work.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Dolphin, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. I get the dilemma and want to be part of that solution. But I do wonder if this, if we could provide some urgency to the two boards in my area so they don't have to use their LDI to retain the bins. So I've seen the maps, and the maps have been out a long time. And I appreciate what you're saying. The discussion started June last year. But I think if we can identify the bins a little bit more quick. I really don't. It's really unfortunate the boards have to use their LDI to retain their bins. I don't think that should be an LDI cost. So if something could happen there, please. They haven't asked me to advocate for them. I just want to know if there's a solution that we can provide. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor, for your question. And through the chair, yes, we will be reaching out to local boards to understand how we might need to address any potential LDI funding queries that they might have. So that process will be occurring soon.
Thank you.
Councillor Hills, please.
It's more of a question for you, Mayor. I've sent a slight amendment through to discuss. I didn't really know that bins was coming up today.
I believe the people beside me are talking about it, so they'll come back to me shortly on that. I haven't seen it, but I've been just trying to run the business. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, can I just make a comment about bins to Claudia, because I think this has got to be the greatest example I've ever seen of a good policy enacted really badly. And we passed something in December of 22 which said we want to get rid of about 30% to try and make some savings. Great, sign me up. We want to only do those bins that are hardly utilised. Sensible. We want to do those where there's a nearby alternative. Cool, done. What actually has happened in our ward is whole shafts of bins have been taken away where people are 3 kilometres from the nearest bin. Bins that were beside concrete tables that we as a council had put in for people to use to have picnics on, but the bins were taken. In McLean's Park, where people walk their dogs in the morning, I go there and there's just so many people walking dogs, all the bins went. And the anger that created, I just literally don't even want to go out dog walking anymore because I cop it all the time. So then I took it up with Marcel Morgan, who's manager of area operations, and I said, how the hell did this happen? He said to me, and I've got a copy of the note, the local board were briefed on what bins and agreed. So I went to the local board and said, are you out of your cotton picking mind? And they said, we were never asked. Now, I don't know who's telling the truth, but we have had a tremendously good idea implemented probably to the anger and hatred of the two councillors. We're being blamed because the local board put out a note to people saying, well, it was the governing body and your two councillors that decided to do this. No, it wasn't. We decided to get rid of underutilised bins that had a reasonably good alternative. And I can show photos on the screen if you want to see them. I was walking around the Hamilton Lake the other morning. No rubbish bin was less than 50 metres from the next one. And it's the same as the walkway around our part of Howick when you go around the Rotary Walkway. Bins gone, 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 gone. And to add insult to injury, one of the big bins that was taken away has been replaced right beside it by $90,000 from our arts people with an aluminium statue. Now, if you don't think that really pisses people off when the bin goes, but there's a piece of artwork made of aluminium that cost $90,000 from our arts people. So I'd make a plea with you, if we make a good decision like this at the governing body, can we put some more real effort into making sure there is a really strict procedure followed to ensure that bins that are not needed, go, count me in, and not cause the mayhem that they've caused us?
There's an impassioned speech. Councillor Sayers, are you up there somewhere?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, thank you. Claudia, just a couple of points that I'm clear on. I understand from the Rodney ward or the Rodney local board area that no bins have been removed at all, just confirming that with you, and B, that was done by them using the LDI. Am I correct on those 2 points?
Yes, you are, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, and thank you, Claudia, for your hard work. I know you're getting a bashing, and I'm about to add to it. I'm sorry. I just want to point out that in April 2019, when I was on the Waitariki Rangers local board, there were several deliveries, presentations made to us about the increase we were going to pay to our contractors and what they were going to supply us for that. And it was dividing our full facilities contracts into clean and green. And it says here that we're going to have 0 overflowing rubbish bins. We're going to get 150% more. The rubbish bins were going to be emptied 150% more. I asked at the time, how can you empty rubbish bin 150%? And it also had a service pledge of the buck stops here. That was many tens of millions of dollars of increase in the full facilities contract. So I suppose it's maybe not a question you can answer, but how did we go from there to here in such a short time? And I would just make also one comment in my area. The reason the regional parks gets away with no rubbish bins is because the local parks border. The people can't even tell the difference between where the grass of one stops and the other starts, and those bins have been left. So I suppose my question is, it's just turned around, it's just turned around so quickly in only 4 years, 5 years.
So thank you, Councillor, for your question and through the chair. So yes, we do acknowledge that things have changed around a lot in the last 3 to 4 years. Part of that has been prompted through obvious budget constraints that council has contended with, including to try to minimise cost to Aucklanders. And we all have a role to play in trying to find savings so that we can help make that impact. What we also have in our full facilities maintenance contracts is that some of the asset portfolio has changed. So more of the assets from other areas, including some Auckland Transport assets, have come into the full facilities maintenance contracts for management. So that has changed the asset base. But also what we have done for the bins, for example, and for the other savings that were proposed as part of the annual budget, is that we had to implement them at pace. And it's the speed of some of these implementations that were required so we could meet the budget expectations, but it's the speed of that has in some instances perhaps caused the concerns that you're hearing about. But that doesn't mean we can't try to rectify them, nor that we don't acknowledge when we have made mistakes. And just the comment before regarding the Howick area, some of those bins had been reinstated in March to try to address the concerns that we heard about. So we do acknowledge with the volume of bins that we've removed, there have been some areas where there've been concerns. Most of the bins have been removed, though, with actually not a huge amount of concerns. And we will continue to work with our local boards to try to address the hotspot areas and where we need to help amend it. What we're also doing is we're tracking over time the total bin wastage, as well as the litter that we pick up. And we're going to be tracking the combined volume of those over time to understand what difference are we making in terms of total waste and what other efforts do we need to put into place to help reduce littering and waste in Auckland overall. It's very important that we stay clean as a city, but we also needed to implement these changes quickly, including so that we could pull back on some of the full facilities maintenance costs that you're referring to, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, we're nearly there. Councillor Furley, then Councillor Bartley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Claudia and team, for your presentation. I'm really mindful of the pressure that our staff were under when we approved those budget cuts last year, and I think that the cuts in services, while we maybe didn't understand what that might look like, that this is actually what it looks like. So I'm really mindful of that in terms of the staff. But the other side of it is also about trying to drive behavioural change, because we want Aucklanders to try to be more mindful about the waste that they're, carrying. And I've lived in Japan, there are no bins anywhere. There are just no public bins. You're talking about a country of 190 million people, the same size as New Zealand landmass, but there are no public bins because people are expected to take their rubbish back home with them. So my question is, because it has been a very quick change in some areas, what have we done as an organisation to try to educate, bridge that gap so that we can bring our community along with us on that journey of behavioural change? What have we done to actually let our communities know, hey, we're removing the bins, but these are the things that you can do so that you're not, so that we keep New Zealand clean? Kia ora.
Kia ora, and through the chair, thank you very much for your question, Councillor Foley, and also thank you for the comments. And you're absolutely right. A lot of this is around behaviour change. And had we reflected on not needing to perhaps implement it with the speed that we have had to implement it, we possibly would have learned from this in terms of the advanced storytelling ahead of implementation, but due to the speed and due to the budget constraints that we were attempting to address, we had to try to run communications concurrently. But we still do have some communications work that our teams are helping support, and we are working with our colleagues in the communications department to see what else we can do. Interestingly, you would have seen some articles that are also coming out from media that we do not have influence with. There was a recent spin-off article that also referred to how other countries are managing this, and also referred to the responsibility we all have as Aucklanders to keep our city beautiful and clean. And so we are seeing a little bit of divergent views from Aucklanders about the concerns of removing bins, and actually that other people are supporting the removal of this, and that people are recognising we have a role to play. But we will continue to support communications, and we will also continue to support our local boards in their communications, and some of them have done those communications also very effectively.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Councillor Bartley, please.
Oh, thank you. It's always implementation with us, because I feel like we're at this crux of where we could take our city, and we have a vision, we want to get there, but then when we do it, we piss off so many people. So I agree with the sentiments that have been shared here about we got to do this, with our communities on board with us, and better communication all around. So I'm heartened to hear that bins are being reinstated in some parts, because I don't think it's fair for our local boards to use their LDIs, given it was like our regional decision strategically that we made. So I'm happy to hear that, because there are some bins in my area which you kind of think, actually, it would be good if they were reinstated. So I'll work through my local board with that one. As for me and my dog, I pick up his poo and I take it home, because the bin that we use in his park has been removed, and that's all good, because I understand the reason why, but that's because I sit around this table, whereas the general public wouldn't be privy to that kind of information. My actual question was to Gary, and I just wanted to know, is there any work happening, given that we're seeing the drop in consents? And we already have a housing shortage in our city, which we know of when we had the floods, and we were trying to find places for people to live temporarily, and they ended up in their cars, a lot of them. And then, we're seeing the unemployment going up, 12,000, I think you said. So, yeah, you mentioned it's a cycle. Is it going to get better? And if it's not, then how are we dealing with it? Because it feels like there's this big train coming to us, and you mentioned this financial crisis, Mia, in your speech, which I thought was so negative and so doom and gloom, and now it looks like it's coming to life, like it's going to happen. So I'm wondering how we're dealing with it also as a council with this big train wreck that we see approaching us. So back to you, Gary, and happy birthday.
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. just comment that yes, we are at a contractionary phase of the cycle. We have had quite a roller coaster since the pandemic. We had a period where the economy was expanding and there was growth in jobs, and we've had strong growth in wages. And so now we're coming down the other side of that roller coaster with the contraction in activity and jobs, and obviously the cost of living and higher interest rates are hitting some households in particular. But I would say that with cycles we do sort of oscillate or wobble around a trend, and it's really that sort of long run trend that we're interested in too. But for the near term, I think for this year it's going to be very much pressured for households, some in particular, and we hope to see 2025 being a bit of a stabilisation and perhaps getting on to a better phase of the cycle. But in terms of, you mentioned consents, we had building consent numbers out just under an hour ago, and we had 1,250 odd for the month of March in Auckland, and that's pretty similar to the same time last year. So in terms of month to month, I'd say that decline, there's a case that you could argue that things have stabilised in terms of the reduction in consents. So it really shows that there's still a pipeline of houses out there waiting to be built.
Councillor Watson, please.
Just a quick question, Claudia, on the bins, if you don't mind, because like others, I've certainly been receiving a lot of communications from people in my ward. Just one, a very pragmatic one, given the taking away of bins and the reinstatement of bins, and I guess the increased surveillance of bins, in the first instance, is that resulting in any extra costs via the contract in terms of extra work that's having to be done, or is that included?
Overall, it's not generally resulting in a significant extra cost, no, because the savings are really from the reduction in the overall bins and therefore the waste collection. The one-off reinstatements are not of such a significant scale to cause a material impact. But what we can do is we will be continuing to monitor and confirm that, so we hope to be able to continue to provide you updates, including via that memo.
Okay, and I take your point, Claudia, which was a good one about the example of the regional parks, where initially there was a lot of resistance to that, and certainly that the parks I'm familiar with that then was overcome. I suspect with areas around town centres and where people congregate either locally or people coming into an area, it might be a different dynamic that's at work. So I'm just really seeking some reassurance as to the ability to monitor areas where there are issues and to respond quickly, because obviously not all councillors or local board people around looking around the bins. So I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more detail insofar as it relates to how problem spots can be quickly identified and dealt with without it necessarily having to come through, exhaustive complaints or elected people.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a very good question. So one of the most obvious ways we do that is through litter collections. So we continue to work with our contractors who, the full facilities maintenance contractors, to understand where litter hotspots are and to see whether or not that's one of the ways that we needed to change where the bins are. At the moment, because the project is rolling out, we are looking and responding to the complaints, and we are responding to local board and other elected member feedback. But as we progress this and as things change over time, we will also continue to look at other data, predominantly litter data.
Okay, thank you.
You'll be a litter day saint. Councillor Fletcher.
I have a question to our CEO, Phil. My question to you is that you've heard today, and this is not a new theme, it comes to the whole governance structure that we have, where you carry the responsibility of the management of those policies that we make on considered advice. So often it is about implementation. It might be bus lanes, it might be rubbish bins, it might be rates remission, it might be... Have you ever given thought to creating a reference group amongst the elected members so that on those policies, and we know that there are going to be more as we move into the future, the public don't like change, so how do we manage change and how do we do it constructively? That we're not just pointing the finger at officers that we say, oh, well, they've done that badly, that we can carry some of the responsibility ourselves. So is there kind of, have you ever given consideration to a small reference group that can be a bit of a litmus test on looking at the implementation, or rather, if that's not to be something that you would support, making sure that on whatever policy we've got, we have a lens of implementation so that there are not the unintended consequences as this goes through. Because the bottom line is, this policy is not going to change, but we've lost a lot of reputation in the process and goodwill. So I just, again, don't need to answer me today, but I think that as we go through a lot more change, we need to really think deeply about how we manage that change. And I think elected members want to support you. So it's just how we can make our input into that.
Look, it's worth considering. Fair to say we use reference groups, steering groups, if you like, on a case-by-case basis very frequently. I mean, obviously the governance arrangement that we have needs to respect the individual or the autonomy of 21 boards, and it needs to somehow work in terms of the space between your policy decisions as a governing body and the reality on the ground at a local level that the boards are concerned with. So quite a bit of complexity there, and that is at the heart actually of the difficulty of navigating some of these savings scenarios. So I'll take it offline and think about what might be useful there. I do think, though, that as we contemplate a program of savings and as we advise you as a governing body about this on a regional level, we probably need to have more robust conversations about consequences and implications and be clearer for your benefit and for ours what that could look like.
Okay, I'm just about got to the end of that one. I think listening to that, we shouldn't be scared of making bold decisions. I think Councillor Williamson was right. It was a very good decision. We shouldn't be scared of attempting to save money. We've heard from Gary Blick it's a good idea to save money. We've heard also that putting the bin back doesn't cost any more. The saving is in the reduction of rubbish. We've also heard from Councillor Fully, who I agree with. She's lived in Japan and I've spent time in Korea. Those countries don't have rubbish bins and they're clean. And we collect from everybody's house every week and everybody's business every week. And we've allowed our people to become lazy and drop their rubbish everywhere. And it's embarrassing. And I can tell you as a member of the board of sea cleaners pick up more rubbish than you could believe, and it's disgraceful that we have to do that. And so I think education is very important. We need to remind all those people who want us to save money that they can take their rubbish home. We collect it every week from your house. And if you don't want to do that, we can have it all in the bin. And so I'm kind of, the education part of it is interesting. With sea cleaners, we educate the young people because it's too late to get the old people. They've had a life of biffing stuff out the window, and it's depressing. So it is you've had a few moans from the Ratepayers Alliance who want us to save money but not do anything in order to save it. We should still have a crack at doing good things, and we should have a crack at doing them better. But
real people who expect it when they go on a long walk.
I expect it.
There should be somewhere to put it. And it's not bloody lazy walking to a rubbish bin and putting your rubbish in.
No, it's not. But then again, a lot of people have been just not walking the rubbish bin and putting it somewhere. So it was a good idea. It didn't get put in place as well as we might, but we'll learn from it. But we shouldn't be scared to have another crack. Now, I'm going to adjourn for 5 minutes because there's a move afoot to slightly change what we were going to discuss. And then just while the scribes and the others are getting their act together here beside me. So I have 5 minutes and we're going to come back here and knock this off. Thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Make use of this. The punishment resumes. We have a moved and seconded and mucked around with thing, which, what are we doing now? We are moving that the, receive the information and the governing body receive staff advice.
Councillor Hills and Councillor Dalton have moved an amendment by way of addition.
Okay, there's a movement of addition, which is in the attempt to try and finish with the rubbish bin. High-use playgrounds, high-use parks, reserve extra, left-handed dog walkers.
Kia ora, Mayor. I'll just briefly speak to it, if that's okay. The original I sent through was a bit stronger than that, but I'm happy to have taken staff advice to slightly change it to receiving advice. Look, the issue here for me is this was, and it's not Claudia's fault and it's not previous CEO's fault. We had $325 million to save very quickly in December 2022, and this was one of the long list of CEO delegated savings that did not get consulted on. And then I think the advice at the time was it was a minor service change and it wasn't going to have much effect. I personally believe that it has been had more effect than we expected, and there is some nuance to it that I believe that staff, in my opinion, and it may not be theirs because they can't often tell us their opinion, but I feel staff are hamstrung by the $1.4 million of savings, that they can't slightly tweak that to bring back some bins in some areas where they believe there's issues. There's clearly issues. We're all being sent bins overflowing every weekend, all the time. Councillor Williamson had, issues. If a bin is genuinely not being emptied and there's proof of that, great. If a bin is down, I've had examples of a bin a mile away down the track that, maybe shouldn't be there, and there should be one at the top, and it's easier for the contractors. There's clearly an issue. I think we're spending a lot of staff time on this. If we could just put a line in the sand, maybe get a little bit of budget back to get some bins back in high-use areas to ensure that the transition for this is better and spending on litter is not happening. This is not pointing the finger. Thank you.
Henderson, do you want to talk to this as well? And then Dalton, and then we're going to put the damn thing.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Sorry to keep everyone from lunch. I'll try and be as quick and brief as I can. Yeah, just a couple of things that I think do need mentioning, and one of them is just to thank staff firstly for the offer to work on these issues that we've raised today. That's really good. Just want to talk all Councillor Fully actually in her question. Staff, at the end of the day, implement what we tell them to do, right? We shouldn't really lose sight of that. And when we pass savings at budget time, this is what happens. When we talk about cuts, these are the cuts. These are cuts that sometimes residents don't like. And that's something that we've got to think about in the future. I was actually very thankful to receive the information just out of the blue from a resident stating the numbers per local board proposed to be removed. Henderson Massey proposed to lose 52% of their bins. The next highest is 40%. The lowest local board only loses around 20. And it's not like Henderson Massey had heaps before. They had a normal amount. It's the eco city, right? After the proposal, Henderson Massey will have one bin per 545 people. For a couple of city suburbs, suburban boards, it was 1 in 200 after this. It's a huge gap, And today we were told that it was easier because West Auckland bins were older than all the other ones, right? That to me is a maintenance issue. Not only do we lose the bins, it's a consequence of council decisions to not renew them as much as the other parts of the city. It's not the community's problem that they weren't maintained, and they're the ones getting the consequence. It's a criteria as well that has nothing to do with demand at all. It's not the demand of where people need to put their rubbish and whether they actually need the bin. It's because they're older, right? It's pretty much saying that it's easier to do it in West Auckland. I'll tell you, West Aucklanders are contacting me about this all the time, and they're a bit sick of being treated like this. The community notice when they're being shortchanged by the city. Local boards shouldn't have to step in either. It's a regional issue. I just want to thank the local board in conclusion for their leadership on this. They've been very strong in the advocacy in the community, doing a fantastic job, and I just want to shout out to them for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Those old bins must have trained them. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. I'd just like to pick up on what Phil, our CEO, said around the decisions that we're making in policy, actually, because when we're making the regional decisions and when it's aligning with a policy or, a decision that we've made, how do we bring the local boards along with us? The two local boards that I represent, are funding the retention of the bins out of the LDI, and that's like between $50,000 and $60,000. They shouldn't have to do that. That's not the way that it should happen. There's two reasons. One is it's actually undermining a regional outcome. They have their autonomy, but does that get us closer to where we need to be? So there's a few things in here, right? There is our commitment to reducing waste. There is our commitment to finding savings. And we need to be able to have those good, robust conversations with our local boards to be able to say, we need you alongside us with this if we're going to achieve those two things at least. I understand rubbish bins are probably required in town centres. People are walking down the main street and they've got litter. Not so much on a walk, poo bags that Councillor Williamson talks about, and people are frustrated with that, but actually, I agree with the Mayor, people should take their rubbish home. How much rubbish can you take on a walk around the park? Why can't you take your dog poo home? There's no reason for that, and this is part of a transition. This recommendation, I'm hoping, will help that transition for community and will also help the local boards so they don't have to use their LDI, because the Manurewa local board is the poorest funded board in the city, and they've got plenty of other things that they need to fund, not the retention of their bins, because they haven't had an opportunity to have a good look at them. I don't know what happened in that process because I've had that information for a long time. I thought that Grant Gillen made a good point when he spoke about Kauri Glen Reserve the other day, actually, and he said with their decision making, they decided to leave the bins at the entrance points and exit points, and therefore they could reduce the bins on the inside. And as I said, within the tracks, and as I said, I think town centres should be handled a little differently as well, because we do get a lot of litter in the town centres. So that's the intention, is to just try and take a little bit of heat out of it while we transition community and local boards and get to an outcome that's going to suit everybody. But the broader discussion is policy implementation and not having all of us working together to deliver on that. Because as soon as we make decisions on cost savings and then local boards decide to fund and therefore impacting their LDI, which could be used on other things, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with that. Thank you.
Councillor Newman, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this amendment speaks to a number of things. I appreciate that some people around here, I've listened to the questions, the comments this morning. I think that some people are really expressing a sense of stress on behalf of their respective community. I understand that. It's a consequence of the decisions that we take. Decisions that we take where we don't understand the consequences, where we don't necessarily communicate with the local boards affected. I mean, the local boards in my ward, Your Worship, I speak with them all the time. The reason why they've effectively had to do this, because they are two of the local boards that have funded the retention of their bins, is for precisely this reason. Their judgment is that the bins in my ward are actually quite important and they want to take the extra time. Good on them for doing it. Why are they having to do that? Well, they're having to do that because we've made a decision and we're trying to deal with the consequences of that. The boards are taking a precautionary approach, and good on them for doing so. Your Worship, you made the comment before the break, and I actually want to, perhaps a bit naughty of me to put you on the spot. You made the comment before the break that Auckland is a can avail themselves of the benefits of their weekly rubbish collection service available at home, for which the council will collect and take away their rubbish each week. I agree. My question, Your Worship, is that would you like to see that service retained? Because the real question, Your Worship, is that, Councillor Henderson, you're right. Your constituents are suffering. But here's another situation which you and I and everybody else around this table who cares to listen to it are going to have to debate very shortly. The proposal where 100% of Auckland households, 100% of Auckland households are potentially up for a 50% cut in their household rubbish collection service if you move from weekly to fortnightly. And I'm really looking forward to that debate. I'm really going to take note of who says what. I tell you what, Your Worship, Aucklanders, if you think Aucklanders are panicked by public bins in local parks going, just wait till 100% of Auckland households discover that they're up for a 50% reduction in their household rubbish collection service. Anyway, Your Worship, I'm sure that this resolution will be of some use because I think it's important to understand the consequences of this. But be aware, Your Worship, that some of those local boards have already taken measures to ensure that this can happen by voting to fund on a temporary basis that service, their public bins, and maybe they were right and we were wrong. Thank you.
Thanks for that. No, I didn't invent the idea of every 2 weeks either, so I'm not guilty there. We'll wait and see. Councillor Filipaina, please add your lot to this lot, and then we might get on with the day after we've got Darby and Lee to finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I really just wanted to see if the mover and seconder would just add this to the substantive recommendation. So that's my question to yourself and the Deputy Mayor. Chair.
I'm happy.
Okay, just do it.
Thank you. I don't wish to speak. I've already spoken to the Chair at Māngere Otahu, and things are in place there already. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Lee.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. I always understood local government to be about rates, roads, and rubbish, and that may be wrong, but that is the general understanding, and why we are a council and why we are enabled to rate people is a social contract. There is a quid pro quo implicit in the arrangement of Aucklanders paying rates to this worthy organisation, and 7.5%, I believe, extra coming up, rates, demands, landing and letterboxes. So I support this motion, but I would ask the mover and seconder whether they would include a reference to local boards in the resolution, because that's their part of administering this council business. They have the local knowledge and expertise, and we should show some respect for that. In terms of respect, I think the motion will go some way to balancing some of the thoughtless comments made during the previous discussion, which I believe will be considered patronising and elitist, and certainly not non-democratic. We are told we need to imitate Japan and Korea from now on when it comes to rubbish bins. Now, I don't recall rubbish bins being, I wasn't familiar with the question of rubbish in Japan when I visited there frequently in my time at sea. However, if we really are wanting to tell the people that we should copy Japan, try sleeping rough and doing all sorts of other unsavoury things in the main streets of Tokyo. Try sleeping out in the Ginza and see how quickly you will be removed. So just think, members should be careful what they say and how it appears to the public that we are meant to serve. And so I think I'll leave it at that. We have two problems, systemic problems, one feeding the other. One is a financial problem that cutting services directly to ratepayers will not solve. And we have another problem that's systemic as well, and that's our reputational problem with Aucklanders. Rather than cutting what Aucklanders want us to cut, high salaries, consultants, squadrons of PR people and other overheads, we tend to cut services directly to the public. The public do not want that. We have to listen a little bit more closely and more respectfully to what the public feel are their needs, because they pay us. We're meant to be public servants. So on that note, I will signal my support for Councillor Hill's and Councillor Dalton's amendment by way of addition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I wasn't aware that picking up rubbish was so elitist. But in that regard, I'm happy to be an elitist person who doesn't throw his rubbish around, but I'm also happy to be an ordinary person who doesn't throw his rubbish around. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. Look, I think people under 25 listening to this will be shaking their heads in disbelief, because most of them have gone through schools in the last 15 years where all the bins were taken out in schools.
Thank you, Councillor Darby.
And but look, it's a day for the plus 25-year-olds, I guess. My question is, I'm not expecting supporting this motion to trigger a full-blown report. I think this is like reporting back by way of memo from the Chief Executive. Is that the expectation? Because I don't see value in a full-blown $10,000 report being worked up in response to this. Is that the Chief Executive's expectation, that it's information by way of memo?
We will, I think it probably is a little bit more than that, if only to observe that if we pull back on aspects of the program, then there'll be cost implications that you need to be made aware of. So I think maybe we'll look for something that's pretty quick and efficient and not too onerous in terms of resources, but I think actually we need to come back with some solutions to get this kind of reset that I sense the room is overall looking for. And if there are cost implications, then my motto going forward will be, let's be really transparent and clear about what that is and where the trade-offs are.
Thank you, Chief Executive. We'll have a quick report, not a quick and dirty report on this. Would Hills and Dalton be prepared to just amalgamate this into the rest of the thing rather than... Okay, in which case if you just nod, we'll put it the whole thing.
Well, I think we've debated it now, we can just vote on
it.
The other thing, I did have local boards originally in there, and then through all the staff changes it was taken out, so I don't know how you want to incorporate that back into Councillor Lee.
I'm sure we'll talk to local boards. All those in favour of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, carried. All those in favour of the original and to receive the report part A, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much for that. Well, that was interesting.
Yeah, actually, that was substantive.
Well, apparently I have to put it together for those of you that are unable to connect A and B. We're going to do A and B now together. All those in favour of saying A and B, please say aye and aye. And aye and aye. And all those against it say nay and nay and nay and nay. And I think we've carried it. Thank you very much for that. Now, for something completely different, we're going to go to item 9, the Recovery Office Update. And I'd welcome Matt Mason-Tanya There's some good progress on the buyouts and some letters going backwards and forwards to Wellington about making things go even faster. And there is a presentation here. And for those people here waiting for item 10, don't give up. We're all trying to live long enough to get to it. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, councillors. A relatively brief report from Recovery this month, which, because of its brevity, I'm most definitely going to take as read. No decisions, so just for noting, please. Just draw 2 or 3 things out of the report that I'd like to kind of emphasise, and then Mace has got a teeny bit more detail on statistics and numbers and stuff. Appended to the report is a recent letter from Recovery Minister Mitchell for your information. We've written back now to that letter. One letter's gone back from the Mayor directly to the Minister, and Phil has sent a letter back in a bit more detail to the Cyclone Recovery Unit. Really, the letters and the conversation are about stuff that was happening anyway, and progress in conversations that were already underway between the Recovery Office here in Auckland and the Cyclone Recovery Unit. And specifically, that's about Category 2. We continue to discuss the implications for homeowners who may be many, many years in a Category 2 situation, while some of those Category 2 solutions are designed, consented, constructed, and so on. And a broad view amongst all those involved, central government, the Recovery Office, and I'm sure in this room that that's not the best situation to leave people in for many years whilst we implement some of these Category 2 solutions. So that's the crux of the conversation about how can we do that Category 2 stuff differently and considerably more quickly. On the conversation of acceleration, even since this report was written just a couple of weeks ago, the categorisation numbers have increased considerably. Phil talked to the numbers earlier on. The report in front of you talks to us being about a third of the way through categorisation. That's already long since been eclipsed. We're now more like a half of the way through categorisation. And in the month just gone, April, we've categorised about 400 homes. So now that we've got all the policy stuff behind us at the very tail end of last year and got solidly into categorisation, it's really beginning to accelerate. Was really delighted to visit Muriwai a couple of weeks ago and talk with the first of the deconstruction contractors that we've now engaged. They're actively involved with 7 homes in Muriwai. The cause of my delight was out of those 7 homes, 3 of them will be relocated, 3 of them will be actively deconstructed and the materials reused, and only 1 of them has to be sort of more traditionally demolished in the more traditional sense. And even then, the waste will be diverted from landfill to the tune of something like 70 or 80%. So really pleased with the deconstruction programme.
Oh, come on, it's not that bad. Alf's given up.
It's not my committee this time.
Yeah.
Who's got the lowest pain threshold?
Whatever it was I did then, I am sorry for whatever it was I did or said. Yeah, so really pleased with the deconstruction programme. The last point I wanted to make before Mace just jumps into a few numbers here is around disputes. As you can imagine, with hundreds and hundreds of homes now being categorised every month, there is an increasing number of homeowners who want to talk to us and to some degree dispute and understand and get more detail about some of the decisions that we've made. A theme in there is Category 1. Category 1 is an enormous broad category, and if I'm being honest, we could have done more to explain the broadness of Category 1 over the previous few months. It spans anything from no damage at all to a property or negligible little damage right the way up to close to intolerable risk to life, but not quite. So you can have some really significant property damage in category 1, but not intolerable risk to life. So it's that top end of that categorisation where we're having an increasing number of conversations with homeowners about, well, surely this amount of damage is more significant than what category 1 allows for. Mace?
Kia ora, Matt, and kia ora members and your worship. I'll take the second half of this. So just to give you some ideas about that acceleration and to acknowledge working directly with communities, really positive collaboration and feedback from communities and challenging us to do better. As Matt said, the second row shows significant progress even since this report was written, with now over 1,200 properties being categorised. We're seeing that because we've got, as Matt said, the policies in place, but also a cadence with our specialist engineers and our systems being quite refined, and communities and homeowners understanding the process and being able to make those decisions quickly. So category 3 buyouts of valuation offers made, are now 185 offers are being made. 87 of those have been accepted as of the end of April, and we've settled on 55 homes and progressing that through the system into deconstruction, removal, or demolition in some circumstances where it's not safe to deconstruct. Disputes, Matt's mentioned those disputes. I just thought I'd mention forecasts as well. We have a strong forecast till the 30th of June, where we'll have the majority completed. 30th of September, another forecast where we will have a vast majority completed, and that's when the scheme closes. We expect that 3,000 people will have entered the scheme as an opt-in by the 30th of September. That's over 1,000 from this year alone. So we have got that ongoing wave of opting in, and many of those are category 1 homes that may be category 1 homes because of the impact on those homes. So where our communication is really critical. Oops. Just really not to spend too much time on this, but showing you the pattern across local boards, and we will send some more information out that shows you the grand total of the number of people who have opted in by local board area, which is currently at 2,715, and you all know where those real high intensity areas are, and they typically follow the Making Space for Water program. But the total opt-ins, people who are opting into the scheme, are important. Probably the other thing to mention, in some locations, we're also aware of where people should have opted in but haven't, and we have a campaign where there is what we've modelled as a likely intolerable risk to life to work with those communities. And some of those are in blue-green network or Making Space for Water locations. So that's a positive, proactive approach with our navigators to do that work. Our real focus is on risk mitigation projects, and as you see, not many 2C properties have identified, and we have been identified, and we are, next month you should see some of those come into this table as we get agreement on funding from the Crown. And of course, you're making your own decisions on the long-term plan funding as well. So we've identified over 190 2C properties that will start to populate this table, and a further 310 that would still potentially have active or habitable floor level flooding in those blue-green network areas that aren't intolerable risk to life, but will get real benefits from those projects. And a further, so taking you to 715 properties that would get active benefits from the blue-green Making Space for Water projects. Our real focus around the forecast, as I mentioned, is to provide people with certainty for the future. And lastly, just a bit of a plug. Tonight we have webinar. It's the fourth in a series of webinar that we're running. And this one's on insurance, so really critical for homeowners. We've had to date in the order of 500 people register for the webinar this evening. And we've got panel participants, as it says, from the Insurance Council, New Zealand Claims Resolution Service, EQC, and our own Tamaki Makaurau Recovery Office. That will really allow questions, so there's some questions already come in, and we'll be answering those questions, but providing, I hope, valuable information to people to assist them with getting their home back into their homes. The last thing that isn't there is we have had some additional funding from the Cyclone Recovery Unit and from the Minister, which we've added to this council's investment in storm response funding, and we've got a storm response readiness program campaign for the winter, commencing in May. So really appreciate that support. And that'll include an information campaign of what you can do around your own property, particularly where you're at risk of flooding. Community-led program around streams, and enhanced or adding to our operational removal of large debris in streams. As we know, debris and caused quite a lot of the flooding where it blocked our stormwater network system. So we're having a real focus on that. And lastly, just to thank many of you for supporting the Recovery Office and working with the community. We appreciate that support. Thank you, Your Worship.
Very good, thank you, Mace and Matt. Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move the report too. Look, thank you both for the work that you're doing. It's complex and it's detailed and it's time consuming. The question I want to ask you for public record though is how are we going compared to other parts of the country that are facing the same types of issues that we are? Because when I'm often asked from the media that they sort of say it's taking an awful long time. So I just want to be able to put something out there that sort of says, yes, it is complex, yes, it takes time, but how do you think we rank compared to other people who are going through the same type of issues as we do?
Thanks for the question. I'm really hesitant to benchmark ourselves against other parts of the country. The situations being faced by Auckland in this kind of urban environment, really dense urban environment, versus some of the situations in particularly the Hawke's Bay, which are quite different, have a considerable effect on how things are categorised and how long things take. Having said that, if you're quite sort of crude about the comparison in terms of a key element, which would be the purchasing and removing Category 3 homes, Auckland compares favourably with both the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne in terms of how long it took to get through all the policy stuff and then actually get to a point where homes were being purchased and being removed and people got out of harm's way. I suppose now, given the opportunity, what I would also say to you is we've done some sort of gentle benchmarking against Australia in particular, and Auckland and the other regions of New Zealand actually compare relatively favourably in terms of how long it's taken us to get to that really key point, as compared with New South Wales and Queensland. Having said all of that, that's cold comfort to anybody who's still in a position that we haven't yet categorised them, so it's not a thing that we talk about too often.
I get that. The point I was just trying to help you with is that, you know, we're quite often told it takes too long, and yet actually we're doing very well compared to other places in Australasia to get through to this point. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you very much. And, you know, taking into account the things that were just said, but those 3,000 houses that you expect are all actually 3,000 individuals. And there's a big gap between 3,000 and the figures up on that chart there. And we're 15 months on, And yes, I've had some people on my special list that have been, actually, a couple of them actually been paid out, so thank you very much. But there's the majority that are still tearing their hair out in the absolute unknown. And I don't know what you can do about that, but I certainly have to, I must have had 3 of them that I've got onto your navigators, but to go for some sort of, support, because they're in a real state of affairs. One of them there now who's been categorised, but now can't even talk about his concerns until a dollar value's been put to it and being told, well, we're not sure when that's going to be. So I'd like to ask kind of where you just see that stuff coming. How far out before, like you're bringing new people in, but we've still got the old people kind of in a tsunami. So that's my first question.
Thanks, Councillor. We've just in the last few days communicated with everybody that opted in 2023 specifically, and are prioritising the people that opted in last year as opposed to the people that have opted in more recently. So that would be one of the key things that we're doing right now in terms of who's already in the scheme.
Thank you, and that actually highlights my point, and I won't reiterate it, but when I sat here and we had a discussion last time, I gave you an example of someone who'd been challenged for have you filled out the forms, I think it was about 6 times. That particular person, who I've had Caroline and others really working with strongly, which is appreciated, but has now been told, you're not in the list yet because you didn't fill out your form until December 23, when actually he filled out the first form in August. So, and that just, you know what it does. So that's just a few. So last question, please. You did just make the comment about the blue-green, the advantages of that, and you said that people who aren't getting brought out but would benefit from the blue-green. But the blue-green isn't just a case of taking houses away and saying to the water, have your way. There's a bunch of engineering got to go into this too. How far away is that?
Thank you, Councillor Turner. So the first, our Healthy Waters are working on those programs. There's 3 projects that are going to the Crown Infrastructure Partners for approval this week, and then the other 8, based around the Minister's letter for Go Faster, will be fast following. We are looking at how we can deliver those first 3 projects within the next 2 years really quickly, and how we can do some pre-works where we can to provide relief that before that full infrastructure program comes into place. But the design work and the feasibility is well down the track.
Thank you. And could I say the pre-work's real important? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foley, please.
Kia ora, thank you, and thanks, guys, for that presentation. Thanks also, Mace and the team who came out to Mangere Bridge, and it was a really good turnout from our community that night. I just wanted to ask, on slide 3, where you've got categorisation by local board area, when you look at that, and I know that when people in my community are going to look at that tonight, they're going to say, that's a really low number from Mangere. So can you just explain why that number is so low? Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. For Mangere, there are actually 112 people have opted into the project, so it does, what reflected here is those who have been categorised, and we will provide you those total numbers that have opted into the process. We're also aware in some areas, and Mangere is one, where over 90 other homes are potentially adversely affected and potentially should opt in. If those homes are in a 2C area, a blue-green network area, they will benefit anyway, so it's a moot point. But that's the campaign around getting people to opt in where it's necessary. We are able to identify those homes that should opt in to the program, and where there's 2Cs, we will include that. So, yeah, certainly Mangere, Otahu, 112 people have opted into that project, and not always reflected here.
Councillor, if I could just add, there's a really high concentration of Kaingaora homes there as well. Our highest concentration, in fact, and they're doing a considerable amount in parallel with our efforts, and their numbers are not demonstrated here.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank
Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Kaingaora have had 406 homes across the region adversely impacted, and they're not included in that, but we are working collaboratively with Kaingaora in terms of the benefit of communities.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Kia ora, and thank you for the work, and I really appreciate how staff in the Recovery Office have been open to regular catch-ups with me about what's happening in my ward, and sharing information, and really proactive in the conversations with community members too, so thank you for that. My question is primarily around this slide, so that's really great that it's still up, and that is the very low number so far in 2C, and acknowledging, the letters that we have on the agenda today, the conversation we're having with central government. I wondered if you might want to, within the parameters, obviously there's some confidentiality applying here, explain that a little bit, because I think early in the process we thought there'd be a lot of 2Cs. Now, while the numbers are starting to spit out and we're seeing a lot of ones, and so maybe understanding, and you mentioned before that perhaps we hadn't sort of front-footed what a one was enough, but perhaps if you wouldn't mind speaking a little bit to why we're not seeing a lot of 2Cs yet, and whether you think that will be something that comes further down the process. And then I have one other brief question. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ferry. The reason why you're not seeing 2Cs, as many 2Cs, is needing a feasibility and approval for funding, so we can give people certainty. But in terms of directly 2Cs, we have identified approximately 190 properties in that category, and then a further 630, 40 properties that will receive benefit in those 2C areas. So you will see those numbers come up as soon as we get that feasibility. We could have provided people with a 2A category, which is further investigation.
Yeah.
Our judgment was that wouldn't provide the certainty that people are looking for, or any more certainty than not having a category at all. So I appreciate that. We have been in our webinars and community groups, community meetings, really emphasising where 2C projects will be. But yeah, thank you for acknowledging the letters. It's an active conversation, so I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. And the other thing was, Matt, you mentioned the communications to everyone who came in 2023. My understanding is that there's going to be messages out to pretty much everyone very soon about when they can expect some confirmation on their categorisation. I sort of don't want to put the cart before the horse, because I know we've had a number of times where we've thought we could meet a deadline and then not quite been able to meet it. The complexity of this task, I think, has been massive, and is probably more fairly compared to the Christchurch earthquake recovery than perhaps our friends in Hawke's Bay, who are dealing with quite a different scenario from ours. So I wondered if you wanted to comment a little bit on, there was a commitment to get categorisations to people by the end of March that wasn't able to be met. Where are we up to with that?
Thanks, Councillor. So if you just use the figures that we've talked about today, we are now getting through around about 400 categorisations a month. We're at around 1,300. We expect 2,600, 2,700, maybe up to 3,000 categorisations in total. If you divide that difference by 400 a month, we will be mid-year, which is what we've been signalling most recently as where we think we'll get to with this. There'll be a tail to this beyond September. People have got until September to opt into the scheme, so there are going to be some categorisations beyond September, but you're talking about very small numbers. The bulk of this work we expect still to be done by mid-year.
quick supplementary then. Is there any prioritisation being done within those cases, acknowledging that, in some cases it's just the complexity of the land, but we do have some cases where, for example, people have been out of their home for a long time, they might have small children who need to attend a local school, people who have health needs, it's difficult for them to find accessible housing alternatives. Those are just a couple of small examples. What are we doing in terms of trying to prioritise the people who are particularly vulnerable in this situation?
Thank you. Aside from, having now identified quite clearly everybody that opted in 2023 and prioritising our efforts there, prioritising also those that we know are displaced as another tranche of people that we prioritise. What we do on a more granular level is once a week, Mace and I meet with our community team who elevate to us cases of particular concern, so cases of psychological, financial, and so on type of impacts that have come through from the navigation team in the communities. And we have a very specific prioritisation process for individual cases, which we go through weekly.
Great, thank you.
Alf, are you out there, Councillor Filipina?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. Tēnā korua, gentlemen. Look, Councillor Foley and Councillor Ferry have asked two of my questions. I've got two very quick ones. In regards to homes that we believe are Category 3 and haven't been assessed, what escalation process is available? That's the first part, Tai.
Thank you, Councillor Filipina. The escalation process really is what Matt has talked about. So through our navigation service, and they're supporting 1,200 families, households at the moment, is actually escalating those issues where there's people most in need, either by being displaced or most at risk. So we do that weekly and get recommendations about how we do that.
Yeah, the supplementary to that, Mace, is those that still need to be categorised and assessed.
Yes, so thanks, Councillor Filipino. Where we're able to use our flood models, for example, and identify where there is intolerable risk to life based on the modelling, we've had priority locations centred around what we believe will be Category 3. So we're taking that prioritised approach, both from a community impact point of view for social and community impact, but also where homes, allowing people to move on from that intolerable risk to life, the objective around the scheme. So two lenses on that issue. Kia ora.
Okay, last part, Mr. Mayor, and that is, has there been any thought of the navigational teams across Tamaki Makaurau and the local board areas going out door to door in the areas you've just identified, Mace? For example, to make sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's happening as we speak, and in your ward, in fact, because there are homeowners who haven't opted in, and there are working alongside Kāinga Ora, for example, in that location, we're doing that directly, and that's occurring across other wards and local board areas as well.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Filipina. Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you. Are we allowed to discuss the content of the letter about the 2 Cs, or is that not? I can't understand if that's on our agenda or that's will be public.
It's
okay.
Sorry, you mean the letter that came from the Minister?
No,
or what we've said back?
Yeah.
No, when it's able to be released, we'll release it.
Okay. Well, I'll try and keep it high level. I guess, in the discussions in the political advisory group, I have concerns about, I do want, obviously, people to be rushed forward as possible, but I do have concerns that we don't get future money for blue-green networks, say. Is it my understanding that our constant push will be to ensure that we can do both, just to give certainty to residents earlier, but we're not going to end up with large tracts of abandoned land that we can't do anything with. That's the aim.
That's the intent, quite clearly, Councillor Hills. So where we can deliver a blue-green network within the 2 years that Minister Mitchell has urged us to do and move quickly, that will occur. In other locations where infrastructure needs, there's an infrastructure deficit or an infrastructure failure that's causing flooding, we're putting that into business cases for central government to consider and co-fund with the funding in alignment with the funding agreement.
And can you allay my fears that I've said to you privately? We don't yet believe this is any attempt to cut the budget or reduce funding from government. We don't believe that that's the case.
We've had assurances there's no intent to cut any of the money from the National Resilience Plan funding of $6 billion or the agreement that Auckland Council has with central government on this.
Thank you. And very last question, and because they're also different, have we yet got some case law or some perfect answers to slips on council land that affect private land? Because we're still getting tons of those requests, but we know sadly it's usually not a great outcome for the person. But have we got a line in the sand on that, or is it still case by case and largely around public assets? Because I know we've had 10,000 slips, so I can't imagine we can fix it all, but
it is case by case, but there's a good program in place, particularly with parks and community facilities and Auckland Transport, where there's public land, and supporting homeowners and landowners through that process. So I'm confident that those being worked through in a proactive and reasonable way for people. In some cases, Auckland Transport's able to deliver direct responses, but not always, and the same goes for parks and community facilities.
Thank
you. Okay, Councillor Sayers, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My question is probably a question of clarification or inquiry. With category 2C properties that might have been are going to take a few years for those people living in those homes to feel safe. Is there any growing pressure on you to change those categorizations to category 3, therefore triggering the buyout? Are you getting pressure from people just feeling that they're unsafe, having to wait too long, and are now wanting to push into category 3 somehow?
Thanks, Councillor. I wouldn't say we were having pressure particularly from homeowners to do that, but it's something we're conscious of and have been conscious of for quite some time now, that it's not really a situation that we want to leave people in for years and years on end in a 2C home for 5, 7 or 9 years whilst a 2C solution is designed, implemented and so on and so forth. We know how long these things can take. So we've been proactively trying to figure out a different approach for these long-term 2Cs for quite some months now, and that's the crux of the conversation with central government. So
well, thank you for that. I guess I'm assuming that once you get some more clarification, that will be communicated out to those 2C people when anybody's making inquiries along those lines.
Of course.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, that brings that to a close, and thank you very much for the presentation and the work you've been doing on this for some months under pressure, and for handling the recent pressure from the Minister to speed things up, which is all good. We've got a...
You need a seconder, please.
No, I propose this, and the Deputy Mayor seconded that we note the progress on the Tamaki Makaurau recovery efforts. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much. This brings us with great excitement to the Ōrākei Local Board and item 10. And before they do, we have the Mission Bay Kohimarama Residents Association here, and a lady called Wanda is going to come forward and address us. And Before we get into this, the Deputy Mayor would like to move the whole discussion about this, and I'm sure somebody else would like to second it. Councillor Newman, thank you very much. So that's on the board. We're in your hands, Wanda Mountford. Welcome.
A very good afternoon to the Mayor and to the governing body. You are aware my name is Wanda Mountford and I'm actually here representing the Mission Bay Kohimarama Residents Association. I would like to briefly put forward the community's view that there is a genuine need for Tagalad Reserve to be returned to the Aoraki Local Board's governance. I cannot overstate the community's support for this issue, the community's need for these facilities and the community's frustration that these public facilities have been locked up and unusable for the past 8 years. Because of the strength of our community feeling about the retention of Tagalad Reserve, our association has undergone a very thorough consultation process over the past 5 years. To accurately gauge the community's stance on this reserve, we have held numerous public meetings and we've conducted a community survey and petition. We have also engaged an independent consultant to host an open day on this reserve where they were tasked with amassing independent public feedback on this issue. Our community has made it clearly known that they were always of the view that this green space and its buildings were required, and they are very unhappy it made its way onto Schedule B without community consultation. Numerous needs for these facilities have been identified and detailed in a report that we submitted to Auckland Council in 2022. To highlight just 2 of these needs, firstly the need for green space. The only reserve in Mission Bay that caters for all abilities is Selwyn Reserve on Mission Bay Beach. This reserve is used by people from all over Auckland and tourists, and it does suffer from gross overcrowding in summer months and weekends and during organised Auckland-wide events. While our residents actually welcome the diverse cultures and diverse range of activities that give Selwyn Reserve its character, they are also frustrated that this regular overcrowding precludes them from using their only All Abilities Reserve for a large part of the year. Whilst Tagalad Reserve could be considered only a pocket park in size, it would provide an easily accessible central green space for the local community to use. Bearing in mind Mission Bay and its neighbouring suburbs are zoned for and are undergoing high densification, the community sees the provision of this green space as very necessary for community use and well-being, both now and in the future. Tagalad Reserve is flat, it has ample parking provided, it has park toilets provided, and it is within a 15-minute walk-in cycle for residents. This makes it very suitable to cater for all ages and all abilities, including those with mobility challenges. The buildings on this reserve are also needed for multiple reasons. As both Kohimarama and Mission Bay do not have a community centre, our residents are required to use neighbouring community centres. However, suitable times and facilities are often not available for our residents. Another important need for the buildings is to provide a community hub for essential community services. For example, our area has one of the highest proportions of older residents across Auckland. These older residents are not immune to the challenges faced by other older people across Auckland, and currently about 10% will be experiencing abuse and/or neglect, and about 20% will be living with loneliness and isolation at a level that is seriously detrimental. We need a service in our area like that of Age Concern, and one of the buildings on this reserve could provide a much-needed eastern hub for a service like that and other community services. From a financial perspective, we are actually very aware that community facilities can no longer be a burden for Auckland Council. We have identified many organisations that are keen to lease or rent both the buildings and green space on a regular basis, and that this income could cover ongoing running costs. We also believe that our current local board members have the ability, expertise and drive to ensure the successful provision of public recreational and service facilities at this site. Just before I conclude, I would also like to point out that it is worth highlighting that Healthy Waters are not in favour of development on this site due to its location in a very active floodplain. And to conclude, we would like to thank our local board for their resolution to take on this site as a local service property, and I would like to urge you all present to remove the non-service status for Tagalad Reserve, to remove this property from Schedule B so it is no longer considered for sale, and to return it to the capable governance of the Ōrākei Local Board. Our community are determined to support this reserve. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and if anyone would like to answer questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Just possibly Wanda will be immediately followed by the local board, so possibly we can hold our questions till we've heard both of you, because you are both speaking in favour of the same thing, as I believe. Is that correct? So hang about, Wanda, and I'll invite Scott to bring his team forward. But thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's moved and been seconded to be received, and all those in favour of receiving, please say aye. Contrary, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're just going to make space for Justine. Angus, why don't you...
There's 2 council seats.
Yeah, take Councillor Watson's seat.
You can keep it, actually.
Thank you, Your Worship. Please note I made no comment.
Or he could do better and go right up the front. That would be the best solution.
First class. Good answer.
Way above my pay grade. Your Worship, councillors, thank you for your time given to us today. As you've heard earlier in the meeting by Wanda, the local community strongly supports council retaining Tagalad for community use. As Auckland and our local area intensifies, we need to retain green open space for health and well-being of our communities and our ratepayers. Our local board and community have been advocating for the return of this property since 2016, and our board has made numerous resolutions to that effect. Staff also support the return of Tagalad as a service property to the local board. As Wanda has mentioned, Healthy Waters do not support redevelopment of Tagalad Reserve due to its location in a floodplain, and support retaining it in council ownership. Flood modelling of the wider area is underway, although could take up to 3 years, and Tagalad has been identified as a site for potential stormwater management. But the key thing to keep in mind as you reflect on the decision before you is that Tagalad Reserve should never have been removed from local board governance as a service property in the first place. The decision was unilaterally taken by officers with no reference or consultation with stakeholders or the local board. A desktop analysis report was written by officers that indicated the property was not required. It did not appeal to stakeholders or the local board. It never came before the board, and instead officers recommended to the governing body that they hand the property to Eke Panuku for consideration for disposal. The board has always disputed the content of what we regarded as a poor quality report. The community, as Wanda has said, has subsequently commissioned its own independent report at their own expense, and council at more considerable expense redid their own report. I have it here, all 43 pages of it, which came to us in November of last year. Now, I wish to put on record that the decision was taken by past officers, and the officers that are before you today are not to blame for the situation we find ourselves in. In fact, to the contrary, the lot we've been working with have been great. They have worked steadily, and professionally, and acknowledging past stuff-ups, have provided good advice to our board and have made the recommendation to return the property to a local service asset. It's important, councillors, to also realise that a decision not to return has implications for each of you and your local boards, as local boards are allocated governance over local parks for the benefit of the communities they serve. A decision to return Tagalad is consistent with the principles of increased decision-making, which is a policy already approved by the governing body. It's also consistent with the direction proposed in the LTP to enable greater local board empowerment. When it was in Eke Panuku's hands, it was identified as what we'd call a second-rate prospect for selling, Category B. In fact, it was at the bottom of Category B, not low-hanging fruit. Now, why is that? Well, Eke Panuku absolutely knew that the presentation of this property for sale would likely spark a citizens-led judicial review because the community was well aware of the council's processing errors. Eke Panuku were also aware that they would likely receive a challenge from the Melanesian Mission Trust, who had gifted the land to Auckland Council in the first place for recreational purposes. They would likely challenge to have it returned to them, or at least be offered first refusal. And they knew there would be a need to have a revocation of the reserve status part of the land, which requires by law consultation with neighbours and affected stakeholders, and of course the local board, and they knew that was going to be a fraught process. All of these things can be dealt with. You can build in a floodplain, you can revoke reserve status, you can do these things, but it's going to take a long, long time, it's going to take a lot of money, and there's going to be a lot of fireworks. Plus, it's in a floodplain. Councillors, I just want to channel Councillor Stewart's comments. We've been here before by encouraging developers to build on property that's in a floodplain. And at the same time, I'm not sure that it's good practice to have your names associated with selling a property, a council property, to a developer and encouraging them to build on a floodplain when we're doing all this work on making space for water. I also want to reiterate Councillor Fletcher's comments and Councillor Lee's comments. There is reputational risk here. We do not look good. It's not a good look for you guys to be voting to sell a property for developers to put apartments on a floodplain. Our board acknowledges that despite the reserve and its facilities being run down and neglected over the last 8 years, that if the governing body returns Tagalad to the local service property, our local board will be responsible for funding its renewal and refurbishment to enable it to be returned to community use. The board has already set aside budget in the coming year to bring the building back to the condition in which it left us, some $200,000. In conclusion, councillors, we are a process and rules-driven organisation. In this instance, we have not followed the process and we have broken the rules. Now, we don't need to apologise because it's ourselves that are the victims. But we do need to stop perpetrating this situation where we have not performed particularly well as an organisation. In summary, we ask you today to right a past wrong and allow us to look after and develop Tagalad Reserve for our community. Thank you for your time.
Excellent presentation, thank you. And I have questions from councillors.
Sorry, my apologies, Your Worship. I mean, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chairman. And just through the Chair briefly, just to acknowledge all the work to bring this item to you today, and just to note the further staff advice, which is an attachment to the cover report that gives our perspective on many of the aspects that Chair Milne has just covered here, and happy to answer any questions from a staff perspective. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Councillor Hills and then and Councillor Dalton have questions from the Planning Committee.
One question for, I'm assuming, Deputy Mayor who'll be moving it. Are you going to change A to support the request instead of consider? Or am I not right on the steps here before we discuss it? Okay. Okay, because I think consider the request is not correct. Okay, thank you. The question I had, and thank you, Chair, and the board for the community for this. I guess my question is more of a bit of advice, but have you spoken to Pesifree Kaipatiki or Shore Junction on the shore? Pesifree Kaipatiki managed to have a very similar thing happen. They picked up the bowling club in Glenfield and they've spent no council money or local board money. They've actually got a bunch of people like Naylor Love, local businesses to all put in, and they've got a master plan for the site that they're all doing with some support from local board over time. But and same with Shore Junction. I think there was 3 or 4 members of the club left, and now Shore Junction have taken over that site, and it's actually young people who are redesigning and investing in that bowling club as well with no council. So I just think there's some innovative ideas and relationships you could probably build.
Thank you very much, through you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Hills. Yes, indeed, we have. In fact, the Mission Bay Kai Residents Association have been working with them, and Deputy Chair Powery has also been instigating discussions on how we can use this facility. But I do appreciate the input.
The original figure, I think, Pesifree Kaipatiki were given was going to be $700,000 to get back to new of council money, and they didn't need any of that. They got volunteer and donations and things, so it's quite good.
Councillor Dalton, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentations. Wanda, yours was really good, so was yours, Scott. I have a question for Justine. I was just reading the report around the costs for the OPEX, ongoing OPEX. Do the local board get a transfer of any funds for that reserve from where it's sitting at the moment? Because anything needs to come out of their existing budgets, from what I understand.
Yes, that is correct. So in recognition of the removal from Schedule B, our advice to the local board has been to accommodate those costs within their existing budget as part of the consideration of the return of this to the portfolio. Chair Milne may have a different view to share. Yeah.
Well, we reckon that's pretty rugged. Sort of reminds me of the consultant who asks to borrow your watch, tells you the time, and then sends you an invoice. I guess we think it's pretty tough that we have an asset removed under less than ideal circumstances from us, and we have to pay to get our own back. Hey, we're not going to fight you to the death on this.
Well, I tend to agree with you, and maybe it's a conversation that can be ongoing with the Deputy Mayor.
We'd appreciate that.
Just out of curiosity, I was having a look on Google Maps, and I noticed on the corner of Atkin there's a site there, and on Google Maps, if it's still true, it was going to have development on it. What was that site before? It's just a curiosity. Oh, okay.
Just for your interest, Councillor, if you look at a 1 kilometre radius of this particular reserve, there's 403 new units being consented in the last 2 years.
I have sympathy for what's happening out there.
We have real intensification going on, even in these developed suburbs of Auckland.
Yep, it's a perfect reserve for the community. You have my support. Thank you.
We could always sell it to you for $1. Might have solved the problem. Anyhow, I have a moved and seconded recommendation. It's quite long, but I've read it carefully and it does seem to cover up for what you're trying to get out of this. And I've got a couple of more questions here. Comments. Henderson, there's not enough of these in West Auckland, I think, and he's got a few bins to send you.
No, I was just going to apologise, Chair, because I have to bring up West Auckland again. But last term, I actually got a bit of land in Langholm removed from the sale and had to work very hard to do so because it was in a floodplain. And actually, I just wanted to publicly say the Deputy Mayor was incredibly supportive of that work, and it is, I think, a principle that we should be following, and I'm actually glad to be following it here. So happy to support. So thank you.
Very well done. Councillor Philly.
Kia ora, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. And I had something very similar happen when I was chair of the local board, where we had a park that was put up for sale without being consulted on that. So I totally understand what you're going through, and tautoko, the sentiments coming through today. Just a question then, what interaction, if any, did you have with Eke Panuku or others before it was put on that list for sale?
Councillor, we had no interaction before it was on the list, but I met with David Rankin a number of times, and we talked about the process. His attitude was, "Hey, look, I didn't do this. It's it's not my fault." But he acknowledged the points that I've made in my presentation, that this is a tough sell. And we didn't do the process right, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. It's not low hanging fruit, and that's why it was well down on list B.
Kia ora, thank you, and I'm supportive. Kia ora.
You go. I think we're going to put this. No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hills.
Oh, sorry, I was confused if we were back in questions or debate, but I'm happy to be in either. But I just wanted a brief comment, and I think it was to what I've spoken to Claudia about this and Councillor Dalton as well, that I think this is another example of how we need to help ourselves get out of the way. This is a really good example of the local board wanting to take responsibility for something. I've seen it happen in the North Shore Ward when Pest Free Kaipatiki said, we want to take this old bowling site, and the first council barriers were, no, it'll cost us way too much, it'll be a burden. But we've actually got a fantastic community asset up there where the community have come together. I actually said, I don't see any way that you'll be able to raise the money for this, to be honest, to the team there. And they just have done it. Community have put money in. People have come and built stuff. Naylor Love have donated all the furniture and, sorry, not the furniture, the wood and the materials. And people have come out of the woods because it was about losing an asset. And I think this is what you're doing here. And I think there will be stormwater purposes you can pick up and work with the Healthy Waters team, probably for good environmental benefit, but also community benefit. So I think sometimes we just need to make it not about money and about how we get the process easier for community and local boards to pick up these things. And it may mean no extra money onto council. Not all the time, but it might mean that. So thank you.
Right. Councillor Simpson, Deputy Mayor Simpson, sorry.
Your Worship, I was going to keep it brief. I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to make a statement, and I don't want to make it negative against why it's taken you a hang of a long, not you, but why it's taken us collectively as a group such a long time to get here. But I do want to congratulate both the local board and the local community. Local community, to my colleagues, they put on the most amazing event that called everybody in together in support. It was really well done, Wanda, and you did a huge amount of work towards that. So to you and your team, I want to say thank you, because the local board was banging its head against a brick wall, getting nowhere from a council process, and you gave them all the ammunition that they needed to actually finally get it to the point where it is today. Scott, to you and your team, this was well before your time. It happened, and I think you've done an amazing job bringing it to this place. So together with staff supporting it, I'm very happy to move it. I can't sit here and vote against this, having done all the work that we've done last term in the floods, knowing the state of the flood issues in this particular location. So I think it's on each and every one of us to support this and congratulate the local board for all their work and the community to getting it to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Bartley. Anyone else want an election speech?
I don't have an election speech. I'm just mindful of other local boards that may be in similar situations and how they're going to be able to come through with what they need to advocate for. That's my question. Like, is there any other local boards in the same situation that perhaps aren't as, I don't know, proactive to take this process? But I also want to acknowledge the Ōrākei local board, that you've got the staff advice that's helped, you've got the community support there, and the fact that we've just come through the floods, and so the importance of the floodplain issue that was backed by Healthy Waters. So I'm happy to support, but I am mindful of what about our other local boards that could be in similar situations?
Councillor, this doesn't set a precedent, and I think that's really important. If you'd asked as a question, I think Justine could answer that. I think that's a very important statement. Correct, Justine?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I guess that's what we've tried to articulate really clearly in this advice, is the unique circumstance of this situation, and it's unfortunate circumstance, of course, but it is very specific to this issue. If local boards wanted to pursue a similar question in other areas, we would need to go to the same level of detail to understand that specific circumstance.
Phil wants to say something, then Councillor Newman, who seconded it, have something. But
I mean,
we do need to sell a few assets, not that they should be dud ones, but at some stage or other, just because it's there, we don't have to save every single piece. This is a good case. I'm quite happy with the presentation. Chief Executive, who is the person who is supposed to be saving some money.
So just to be really clear, staff are supportive of this and party to the recommendation here, so no problem. But just to speak to Councillor Bartley's question, the truth is, I believe there are marginal propositions elsewhere in other board areas, and I think you will need to turn your mind to that. You are going to need, through the back end of the long-term plan process, to turn your minds to the target that is in there for property sales, and that's what drives this process. So you need to look at that, being mindful of the situations that it creates around the region. I'll leave it there.
Councillor Newman? Oh no, have we got Councillor Lee and Councillor Philippina?
I won't take long, Chair.
Join us again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I just wanted to say to Scott, and appreciating the diplomatic way that you're presenting this issue. I mean, the truth is that our offices are good, but our planning isn't always right, and sometimes a good case is presented which actually corrects an error. It won't be the first time, and it possibly won't be the last either. It would be remiss of me if I wasn't reflecting on 2 Arkini Court in my ward, which was identified as, yes, we could dispose of that. Actually, when it went through the hearings process, it was identified it needed to be retained as a reserve, and it was. And we took it off the schedule because actually the advice and the decisions that we took were wrong. The local board and the community were right. I am sorry that it took a hearings process and all of the pain and all of the angst and the uncertainty over many, many months, a year basically, to try and come to that conclusion. I hope that the decision that is taken here will provide some certainty to that community, and I can commend you for it. Thank you.
Councillor Lee from Waiheke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to congratulate the community and the Ōrākei local board for its leadership in this long battle. I want to thank the officers for the support of this resolution, and I want to thank the Deputy Mayor Simpson and Councillor Newman for the motion. I would add, though, that when we are talking about asset sales, particularly the sale and effective destruction of public parks, we don't call it recycling. Recycling has redemptive connotations, and selling a park for development does not. So apart from that concern, I fully support the recommendation or the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Filipina, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This part is just for Justine. Justine, can you tell me the special circumstances that necessitated the change in support? I know there's some feedback, I can actually hear it myself, so it might be your microphone, Mr. Mayor. So Justine, what were those special circumstances that allowed the staff to change mind? Because I think that will be relevant to the other local boards. Kilda.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. As noted in the memo, which is supplementary to the cover report, our team worked with a number of departments across the organisation to bring this advice together. And I think it's the combination of those aspects which is important and perhaps wasn't as cohesive, I guess, in earlier advice. The stormwater aspect, which has been discussed quite a lot, was only identified relatively recently and is pretty fundamental to the recommendation that this site is retained in council ownership. But importantly, Healthy Waters have advised that a community use is compatible with that stormwater requirement. So those two aspects, I guess, with the information we have at the moment, do suggest that ongoing council ownership is the preference.
Alf, you've got your mic off. Hello.
Yep, sorry, my bad. Justine, who is the person that I can contact to get a list of the properties in the Manukau ward that are on the list for sale?
Can I follow up with that name after the meeting, if that's okay, councillor?
I think what we'll, if I might intervene, I think what we will do is, as I suggest in relation to the long-term plan, revisit that list, which effectively, and in fairness to Eke Panuku, is the list that we give them that they are working from. So that it amounts to your instruction to them around the sales. So I think we'll bring the list back into that process.
Yeah, Phil, if you could get that list in the Manukau ward for those from Eke Panuku, or I'll get hold of David Rankin to send me the list. Kia ora.
Katie, bye.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion. It's been moved, seconded, argued about, talked about, questioned about and supported. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, I believe you are now in charge of the Tegalead Reserves.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, councillors. Whatever else you do today, and you've got a hell of a day, you can go home tonight knowing that you've done a good thing and the right thing. So.
Actually, you're preempting. We've got a really good one coming up, mate. So on the basis of that, you better invite me to the opening booze up. Righto. We are now at items 11, 12 and 13. On with regard to item 11 and item 12, we did get a reply from the government about the GST back on rates. It was a weak no. But I reckon most Aucklanders would disagree with that. The government clearly recognises we need more funding tools, so I'll keep on about them. And it was, after all, the idea that came from the government very expensive report into the future of local government. However, I think that seeing as the next three things are procedural, I'm prepared to move all three items 11, 12 and 13, being the forward work and programme of committees of the government body, the summary of the governing body information memoranda briefing, and the summary of the confidential decisions and related information released into the opening. Do I have a seconder prepared to do that? Councillor Fully said she would do that, and she's a lawyer, so I'm probably on safe grounds here. All of those in favour of that grouping of 11, 12 and 13, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. There are no extraordinary items, number 14, that I'm aware of. A number item, 15, allows us to go into a secret lunch to exclude the public for the ones which will be after lunch, which are confidential, local water done well, and a city rail link oversight development. So there are plenty of reasons for this one to go into confidential, and I'm not at all keen on normally doing that, so I will move it can go into confidential, and the second will be Councillor Williamson, who has immense experience in this as well. All those in favour of that, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary. Okay, we are now going to break till 2 o'clock on the dot. That means 2 o'clock, not 5 past. And we're going to come back for one of the most important things we've ever done. So thanks very much for that. I look forward to seeing you all at 2 o'clock. And